124 light-years away, adrift in the infinite darkness, a planet 8 times the size of Earth has just sent us the strongest clue yet that we may not be alone. The James Webb Space Telescope has detected molecules in its atmosphere, molecules that here on Earth have only one known source: life. Their names may sound obscure, but to scientists they are the alphabet of existence. Dimethyl sulfide, distinctive methane patterns, and traces of water, together forming a chemical equation that echoes the early days of life on our own world. This is no longer speculation. Mathematical models and statistical analysis converge on a staggering figure: a 99.7% probability that biological processes are unfolding on that distant ocean world right now. A world whose light began its journey toward us before humans even knew how to write, now sending a question across the gulf of space and time. Are we truly alone? Brace yourself. The answer could forever alter humanity's understanding of the universe. And it all began in a seemingly ordinary moment, until one astronomer leaned in, eyes fixed on the data, and whispered 2 words: impossible. The computer screen came alive with jagged lines of color, flickering in a pattern no one expected. Astronomer Niku Madusan leaned closer, his pulse quickening. The data streaming in from the James Webb Space Telescope wasn't just unusual, it was absurd. In that rainbow of light was a chemical fingerprint that, by all logic, shouldn't exist. Somewhere out there, far beyond the reach of any probe. In a region of space whose light began its journey before the pyramids were built. A planet named K218b had just revealed its secret. Through the telescope's infrared gaze, faint but undeniable, glowed the spectral signature of molecules written in the language of life itself. To understand the enormity of this, imagine trying to detect a single drop of perfume in a swimming pool from 3 miles away. That is what James Webb had just accomplished. Isolating trace molecules in the alien atmosphere of a world 124 light-years from Earth. The reading was crystal clear. Floating in those distant clouds was dimethyl sulfide. On Earth, a compound produced only by living organisms. Every molecule of it here comes from life, no exceptions. Marine phytoplankton pump it into our atmosphere every single day. It is as unmistakable as a fingerprint. And dimethyl sulfide wasn't alone. Methane and carbon dioxide appeared in strange ratios, a chemical imbalance eerily similar to Earth's atmosphere billions of years ago, when primitive life thrived in its oceans. Water vapor wove through the spectrum like liquid ghosts, hinting at vast seas beneath the planet's hydrogen-rich skies. Madusan didn't waste a second. He called a colleague at Cambridge University. "You need to see this," he said, voice trembling with a mix of awe and disbelief. "We're looking at atmospheric chemistry that there's just no natural explanation for, except one." Within hours, probability models began spitting out the same answer over and over. This wasn't random chemistry. Something alive was breathing, eating, and reproducing on K218b. And for the first time in human history, we were looking straight at its signature. Within hours of Madusan's call, the quiet corridors of observatories around the world erupted into controlled chaos. Emails marked urgent shot across continents. Schedules were torn apart. Telescopes that had been aimed at galaxies billions of light-years away swung abruptly toward a single, otherwise unremarkable star in the constellation Leo. In the official star catalog, K218b had always been just another data entry, a name buried in a list of exoplanets. Now it had become the most important object in the night sky. Welcome to Astronomical Library. Astronomers who had devoted their careers to studying black holes, or the birth of galaxies, suddenly found themselves staring at a tiny dot, 124 light-years away, searching for chemical ghosts of alien life. Graduate students were reassigned overnight. Researchers who had never touched exoplanet data were now racing to learn atmospheric spectroscopy. The response was unprecedented, a scientific gold rush. Observatories from Chile to Hawaii coordinated their instruments to catch every possible transit of K218b across its star. Space agencies dusted off shelved mission concepts for next generation. Telescopes built specifically to study habitable worlds private aerospace companies began sketching out the wildest ideas for robotic probes, some envisioning century-long journeys to physically visit this alien ocean. Funding agencies, usually slow and cautious, moved with dizzying speed. Astrobiology, once the underfunded fringe of astronomy, was suddenly the hottest field in science. Research proposals that might have been ignored 6 months earlier now drew fierce competition. And beyond the scientific community, the world noticed. Social media lit up with theories, memes, and dreams. The hashtag #K218 trended globally. Science museums scrambled to add new exhibits. Planetariums rewrote their shows overnight. Theologians wrestled with the implications. Philosophers debated whether humanity's special place in the universe had just evaporated. Science fiction writers admitted, privately, that reality had just outpaced their imagination. For centuries, the question had been whispered, are we alone? Now, for the first time, the universe was whispering back. And the answer was beginning to look like no. K2218 billion ISNT, just special because it might host life. It's special because the universe seems to have built it with almost too much perfection. First, there's its orbit. Every 73 Earth days, K218b passes directly between its star and our telescopes. Astronomers call this a transit, and it's the reason we can read its atmosphere at all. During these cosmic eclipses, a fraction of the starlight filters through the planet's skies, carrying with it the chemical fingerprints of whatever is floating there. That's how James Webb found the signals. And it's also why this detection was even possible. Most exoplanets don't align so conveniently. But K218b, it's like the cosmos tilted the spotlight just right. Then there's the planet itself. At 8.6 times the mass of Earth, it's in the sweet spot for habitability. Too small, and a planet can't hold onto an atmosphere. Like Mars, stripped bare by solar wind. Too big, and the atmosphere becomes crushing and inhospitable. Like Jupiter's. K218b sits in the Goldilocks zone of size, able to hold onto a thick, protective atmosphere without turning into a death trap. Computer models suggest it may be an ocean world, not scattered seas like Earth, but a true water planet with global oceans hundreds of miles deep. Its hydrogen-rich skies act like a thermal blanket, keeping temperatures stable and protecting the surface from cosmic radiation. And then there's the star. K218b orbits a red dwarf, smaller, cooler, and far longer-lived than our Sun. Many red dwarfs are hostile, prone to violent flares that can strip atmospheres away. But this one is different. Observations show it's unusually calm, delivering steady light and warmth without the stellar tantrums that could sterilize its planets. By some extraordinary coincidence, this calm star gives K218b almost the exact same amount of energy per square mile as Earth receives from the Sun, despite being much cooler. This keeps its temperatures in a range where liquid water can persist, possibly for billions of years. The more scientists looked, the stranger it seemed. The atmosphere, the oceans, the orbit, the stability. Every factor lined up as if the planet had been built, not just to allow life, but to encourage it. And if that was true, then what James Webb had detected might not just be life. It might be thriving life. James Webb didn't just detect some water molecules drifting in space. It found the unmistakable spectral signature of active living oceans. When K218b slides in front of its star, the starlight passing through its atmosphere carries hidden codes, dark lines in the spectrum that tell scientists what the planet is made of. In those lines, water vapor appeared not as a faint trace, but as a dominant, pulsing signal. Even more striking, the data showed water vapor in thermal equilibrium with liquid water, a delicate balance where evaporation and condensation happen at the same rate. On Earth, this only occurs above vast, open bodies of water. In other words, K218b isn't hiding ice fields or shallow lakes. It's likely draped in an endless ocean, stretching across the entire globe, hundreds of miles deep. The thermal patterns told another story. Surface temperatures range between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 112 degrees Fahrenheit. The sweet spot where water remains liquid without boiling away or freezing solid. This climate, combined with a thick hydrogen atmosphere, could keep the planet's seas stable for billions of years. And then came the twist. Mixed within that water vapor were other gases, sulfur compounds, and faint organic molecules. On Earth, these are often the chemical whispers of microscopic marine life, exhaled into the air as part of their daily metabolism. The idea took shape quickly. Beneath the hydrogen clouds of K218b, alien microbes could be thriving, multiplying, and releasing their chemical signatures into the skies, just as phytoplankton do on Earth's oceans every day. This wasn't just water. It was living water, or at least, water that had every reason to be alive. Methane and carbon dioxide don't like to share the same sky. Under normal lifeless conditions, they react with each other, breaking down into other compounds until one or both vanish. On planets without biology, one gas always dominates, the other fades away. But K218b defies that rule. Both gases appear together, in abundance, and their ratio, roughly 2 parts methane to 4 parts carbon dioxide, eerily close to what scientists believe Earth's atmosphere looked like more than 3 billion years ago, when our planet teemed with microscopic life. On Earth, methane often comes from methanogens, microorganisms that thrive in oxygen-free environments and release methane as metabolic waste. Carbon dioxide, meanwhile, is a universal byproduct of respiration, decay, and photosynthesis. Having both gases coexist in such quantities suggests that something on K218b is actively replenishing them faster than they can be destroyed by chemistry alone. The deeper scientists dug, the stranger it became. Spectral analysis revealed that the isotopic fingerprints of both gases matched biological production, not geological processes. This ruled out volcanic activity, lightning, or other non-living sources. Even more compelling were the seasonal shifts. Methane and carbon dioxide concentrations rose and fell in cycles that matched the planet's orbit, as if the organisms producing them responded to changes in light and temperature. Just like life on Earth. It wasn't proof of life, not yet. But the patterns, the ratios, the timing, they painted a picture that was hauntingly familiar. A picture of a young Earth, before forests, before animals, when the only life was in the water, and the sky carried its invisible breath. On K218b, that breath might still be rising, across an ocean world, under alien clouds, 124 light-years away. In the crowded field of astrobiology, one molecule stands above the rest as the ultimate telltale sign of life: dimethyl sulfide. On Earth, every single molecule of dimethyl sulfide, without exception, comes from living things. Specifically, from marine phytoplankton, microscopic plants drifting in our oceans. When they die or are eaten, they release DMs into the air, where it drifts upward and shapes our clouds. There is no known geological or chemical process, anywhere, that can produce it in large quantities without life. So when the James Webb Space Telescope detected DMs in the atmosphere of K218b, scientists stopped breathing for a moment. This wasn't a vague hint or a possible coincidence. This was the molecule they had dreamed of finding since the search for alien life began. The signal was faint, like hearing a whisper across a stadium, but unmistakable. The chemical pattern matched dimethyl sulfide perfectly. It wasn't just there. It was consistent with an ongoing source, as if something below the clouds was constantly replenishing it. If DMs exists on K218b, it means the planet's oceans aren't just liquid, they are alive. They might be teeming with microscopic organisms, invisible to our eyes, but vast in number, each one contributing to the chemical symphony drifting into the planet's skies. It was the closest thing to a eureka moment humanity had ever experienced in the search for life beyond Earth. But with that discovery came a new kind of tension, because extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. And in science, proof isn't about what you think you've found, it's about what you can convince the world to believe. News of the dimethyl sulfide detection spread like wildfire. Some scientists called it the discovery of the century, the first concrete evidence that life exists beyond Earth. Others urged caution, warning that nature has a way of surprising us, and that even the most convincing data can harbor hidden traps. Within days, journals, conferences, and private Zoom calls were buzzing with arguments. Could there be some unknown chemical pathway deep inside a hydrogen-rich atmosphere that produces DMs without biology? Or was this truly the chemical breath of alien oceans? Astrobiologists drew battle lines. The optimists argued that the data fit perfectly with known biological processes, and that the probability of a false positive was vanishingly small. The skeptics reminded them of the lessons from Mars, where promising signals had, in the past, faded into ambiguity under closer scrutiny. The debate spilled into the public sphere. Television anchors asked if humanity had just found its cosmic neighbors. Social media exploded with wild theories, memes, and heated arguments. Some insisted the discovery was already conclusive. Others dismissed it as another may be destined to disappoint. Meanwhile, in research labs around the world, teams worked feverishly to replicate and verify the results. Independent analyses combed through every photon of Webb's data. If even one calibration error or data processing artifact was hiding in those spectra, it could unravel the entire claim. And then there was the political layer. Space agencies knew that confirming life on another world would ignite a geopolitical race unlike anything before. A scramble for technology, for exploration rights, and perhaps even for the first handshake between worlds. But amid the noise, one truth remained unshaken. No one had ever seen this combination of gases, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and dimethyl sulfide in such quantities on a lifeless planet. The universe was holding its breath. And so were we. In the wake of the DM's detection, the global astronomical community did something rare. It moved as one. Observatories on mountaintops in Chile, Hawaii, Spain, and South Africa reprogrammed their schedules. Radio dishes tuned their arrays. Even the aging Hubble Space Telescope, long overshadowed by Webb, was called back into service, tasked with cross-checking the alien signal in a different wavelength of light. The goal was simple: leave no shadow of doubt. If life existed on K218b, the evidence had to stand unshaken under the most brutal scientific scrutiny imaginable. Timing was critical. K218b only transits its star every 73 days, and each transit offers just a few hours to collect its atmospheric fingerprints. Miss that window, and the next chance could be months away. A global choreography emerged. Telescopes across continents took shifts, each one covering the planet's approach, transit, and retreat. Space-based observatories captured the wavelengths Earth's atmosphere blocks. Ground-based giants zoomed in on the star's subtle flickers, measuring how the planet's gravity tugged on it. A way to refine K218b's mass and composition. Private aerospace firms jumped in, offering advanced spectrometers and AI-driven analysis pipelines. Even amateur astronomers joined the campaign, capturing high-precision light curves that helped refine timing predictions. It was the largest coordinated hunt for alien life in history. And it wasn't just about science anymore. It was about proof. Proof that would have to satisfy not only scientists, but historians, philosophers, politicians, and an entire human civilization watching in real time. Every photon mattered. Every data point was a potential key to the most profound discovery humanity could ever make. And somewhere, beyond the reach of our hands, K218 billion continued its endless orbit, unaware that billions of eyes had turned toward it. When the first wave of combined data came in, the team expected confirmation of what Webb had already shown. Instead, they found something new and stranger. Beneath the broad strokes of methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and dimethyl sulfide, there were subtler lines in the spectrum. Faint signatures that didn't belong to any simple molecule. Some matched complex organic compounds, chains of carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen that on Earth are often the building blocks of cell walls, pigments, and even energy storage molecules. It was as if the planet's atmosphere carried whispers of chemistry one step beyond the microbial stage. No one dared to call it proof of multicellular life, but the possibility hung in the air like static. More intriguing still were the fluctuations. Over the course of several transits, certain molecular signals waxed and waned in ways that didn't line up with purely seasonal or orbital changes. On Earth, similar patterns appear when plankton blooms surge and fade, or when large-scale migrations shift the balance of gases in the atmosphere. If these variations were real, and not some quirk of measurement, They suggested that K218b's biosphere might be dynamic, changing on timescales of weeks or months. That kind of complexity could mean a food chain, energy cycles, and perhaps even predator-prey relationships in an alien ocean. The idea was intoxicating, but it was also dangerous. The last thing the scientific community wanted was to overreach, to make the leap from chemistry to creatures without rock-solid proof. For now, the findings were labeled unidentified organics. But in private, many of the researchers admitted what they were thinking. K218b might not just be alive, it might be bustling. The current fleet of telescopes had done the impossible. They had sniffed the breath of an alien world from across the galaxy. But now, scientists wanted more than chemistry. They wanted a view. Plans already on drawing boards were pushed into overdrive. The LOVOIR and HABEX missions, massive space telescopes once expected to launch decades from now, suddenly became urgent priorities. These weren't just bigger versions of Hubble or Webb. They were designed to directly image Earth-like planets, to separate their light from the blinding glare of their stars and capture it in razor-sharp detail. With these instruments, scientists could study K218b's atmosphere layer by layer, spotting weather patterns, cloud structures, even color variations in the oceans below. If there were chlorophyll-like pigments, the kind plants on Earth use to harvest light, these telescopes could detect their subtle fingerprints. Private aerospace giants entered the race, proposing ambitious concepts like starshades, massive flower-shaped screens that would fly tens of thousands of miles from a telescope, blocking out starlight so faint planetary reflections could be seen. And then there was the most audacious plan of all, breakthrough starshot, a fleet of tiny laser-driven probes that could, in theory, reach nearby stars in just a couple of decades. K2218b wasn't in the original list of targets, but after the Webb discovery, it rocketed to the top. The idea of sending something there to fly past, snap pictures, maybe even drop a microbe-detecting sensor into its atmosphere, ignited imaginations across the world. For the first time in human history, interstellar exploration wasn't just a thought experiment. It was a mission plan. Every new design, every recalculated trajectory, every budget proposal carried the same unspoken thought. If K218b is alive, we must see it with our own eyes. Even before the proof was final, K218b had begun reshaping Earth, not in a physical sense, but in the way humanity saw itself. Church leaders, from grand cathedrals to remote temples, delivered sermons on what alien life might mean for the human soul. Some welcomed the idea, calling it further evidence of a vast, purposeful creation. Others cautioned that such a discovery could append millennia of doctrine, forcing believers to rethink humanity's place in the divine order. Philosophers revived old questions with new urgency. If life exists elsewhere, is it bound by the same moral codes? Does the universe carry a universal concept of good and evil, or are such ideas as local as the languages we speak? Artists and writers seized the moment. Murals bloomed on city walls, vast ocean planets painted in shades of blue and gold. Science fiction novels, once speculative, now felt like previews. Films reimagined First Contact, not as a meeting with spaceships, but with plankton, corals, and alien reefs teeming beneath hydrogen skies. Economists spoke of a coming exoeconomy, industries built on technologies born from the race to explore other worlds. Politicians used K218b as both a rallying cry and a political tool, calling for international alliances to pursue the greatest voyage in human history. And for ordinary people, it was personal. Parents told their children bedtime stories about the faraway ocean world. Astronomers set up telescopes in public squares, letting strangers see the faint star that harbored it. Social media became a mosaic of amateur skywatchers, posting pictures of Leo, pointing to the dot that had stolen the world's imagination. It didn't matter that we couldn't yet see its shores or hear its waves. K218b had become a mirror, showing us not just a possible other life, but our own hunger to connect, to belong to something bigger than our solitary blue world. It started quietly, closed-door meetings, encrypted calls between space agency directors, vague statements and press conferences about exploration priorities. But beneath the surface, a new race had begun. K218b wasn't just a scientific prize anymore. It was a strategic one. Whoever reached it first, or even just collected the most conclusive data, would control the narrative of humanity's first confirmed contact with alien life. The United States accelerated plans for an advanced satellite, one capable of analyzing planetary atmospheres with 10 times Webb's precision. China announced its own Deep Space Telescope initiative, claiming it could launch within a decade. The European Space Agency quietly formed a task force to coordinate between its member nations, while Japan explored partnerships with private spaceflight companies to send robotic probes into interstellar space. And then there was the shadow game. Intelligence agencies began monitoring research teams, wary of data leaks or covert technology transfers. Rumors swirled of private aerospace firms bidding to sell propulsion systems capable of interstellar speeds, or at least closer flybys publicly. Everyone spoke of collaboration. Behind the scenes, it was a scramble for position, funding, and prestige. Contracts worth billions were drafted, alliances formed and fractured. What had begun as a shared wonder now carried the same competitive edge that had once fueled the moon race. Yet amid the politics, the dream persisted. Every nation, every company involved, still wanted the same thing: to be the first to see K218b's oceans, to capture the image that would change textbooks forever, and somewhere beyond our reach. That alien ocean rolled on in silence, indifferent to the fact that billions of miles away, an entire species was already fighting over the right to meet it. The mission plan was bold enough to sound like science fiction, and yet it was drawn not on the pages of a novel, but in the conference rooms of the world's most advanced space agencies. Phase 1. A fleet of next-generation space telescopes, placed far beyond Earth's orbit to avoid interference from our own atmosphere. Their job would be to map K218b's atmosphere in exquisite detail, using every wavelength of light from infrared to ultraviolet. If there were large-scale blooms of alien life, their signatures would be impossible to miss. Phase 2. A precursor. Probe an unmanned craft propelled by a fusion-assisted solar sail, designed to reach a significant fraction of light speed. It wouldn't land, but it would pass close enough to send back high-resolution images and direct readings of the planet's atmosphere. The journey could take decades, but even in transit, the probe could study other worlds along the way. Phase 3. The most ambitious step, a hybrid crewed robotic mission, carried aboard a nuclear-electric propulsion vessel. It would take a small human team and an array of autonomous drones to the outer edge of K218b's system. From there, they would remotely deploy atmospheric capsules capable of sampling clouds and detecting complex biomolecules in real time. The blueprint read like a love letter to human ambition, each phase more daring than the last, each hinging on technologies that were just now crawling from concept into reality. Still, it wasn't just about engineering. The political and ethical questions loomed large. Should humanity even approach a living world without understanding the consequences? What if our presence altered its environment, even from a distance? Could we be both explorers and guardians? Answers came easily, but one thing was certain. Once the first phase launched, there would be no turning back. Humanity would be committed, not just to the search, but to the first true step toward meeting life beyond Earth. The launch pad was not for a rocket, not yet, but for an idea. Phase 1's first telescope, codenamed Aurora, was assembled in a clean room the size of a football field. Its mirror, a gleaming disk of segmented gold, stretched wider than a house. Engineers in white suits moved with slow, deliberate precision, each aware that a single scratch could undo years of work. In control rooms across 3 continents, teams ran final simulations. Every bolt, every lens, every onboard AI subroutine had been tested to exhaustion. Once Aurora left Earth, there would be no repairs, no second chances. It had to work flawlessly, because it wasn't just looking at stars, it was looking for life. The launch date became a global event. News networks prepared live countdowns. Schools planned viewing parties. On social media, the hashtag #EyesOnK218b began trending days before liftoff. Even those who didn't know a thing about spectroscopy understood the stakes. This was the first real step toward touching another living world. And yet, behind the public excitement, there was a quiet tension. Every scientist involved knew that the first data might shatter the dream, that it was entirely possible Aurora would find nothing but barren clouds, the earlier detections revealed as misinterpretations. Still, the commitment had been made. Humanity was stepping onto a path with no retreat. As the final hours ticked down, the world watched a rocket on the launch pad, bathed in floodlights, steam curling from its fuel tanks. Somewhere far beyond, K218b circled its calm, red star, unaware that an entire civilization was about to send its gaze across the void, searching for the shimmer of alien oceans. At T-0, the engines roared, and Aurora began its slow climb into the night, carrying with it the weight of a question older than humanity itself. Aurora's journey to its final observation, 1 million miles from Earth, at the Sun-Earth L2 position, took 39 days. Each mile carried it farther from the noise of human technology, into a silence so pure that even the faintest light from a distant star could be heard like a whisper in the dark. On the morning of its first scheduled observation, the control room in Pasadena was filled with the quiet hum of machines and the restless shuffling of scientists who had waited years for this moment. First light, the instant a new telescope opens its eye to the universe, is always special. But this was different. This was aimed directly at K218b. The sequence began without drama. Systems check, alignment, calibration. Aurora's massive mirror unfolded with clockwork grace, catching the dim red glow of the exoplanet's host star. Its instruments began sifting photons, breaking them apart into spectra, those colored fingerprints that had already hinted at water, methane, and dimethyl sulfide. Everyone expected familiar patterns, but within minutes, the data feeds scrolling across the screens began to show something none of the simulations had predicted. A sharp, repeating spike. Not random noise, not a chemical line, but a pattern. It appeared in both the visible and infrared ranges, too structured to be natural, too persistent to be an error. The room fell silent, save for the clicking of keyboards and the soft murmur of code-running diagnostics. Could be an instrumental glitch, one engineer offered, his voice flat. But no one in the room believed it. The spike was precise, rhythmic, almost like a signal. For 3 hours, Aurora kept its gaze locked on K218b, recording every pulse. And as the data streamed in, a strange realization took hold. Whatever was causing it, it wasn't in the star. It wasn't in the empty space between. It was coming from the planet itself. The first instinct was to doubt. Extraordinary patterns. Demand ordinary explanations first. Instrument noise, cosmic rays, atmospheric interference from somewhere closer to home. But Aurora was in deep space, far beyond Earth's radio clutter, and the spike had appeared in multiple instruments. Simultaneously, the team split into rapid response groups. One rechecked calibration logs, hunting for any hint of mechanical error. Another cross-referenced the data with other observatories. Even the giant radio dishes in Australia and South Africa were quietly turned toward K218b to see if the pulse was detectable in their ranges. It was. The rhythm was slow, steady, one burst every 17.6 seconds. Each was identical in structure, a narrow band emission that no known natural process could easily explain. On Earth, such precision was the hallmark of a transmitter, a beacon, a deliberate signal. Speculation boiled beneath the surface. Was it possible? Could a civilization, even a microbial one, if it had evolved far enough, be announcing its presence? Or was this something stranger, something we hadn't even imagined? For now, no one dared use the word intelligent in an official statement. Instead, the signal was labeled anomalous, narrowband emission event. Behind closed doors, though the word was whispered, and it made the air in the control room feel heavier, artificial, to verify. The team scheduled a continuous 72-hour watch. Aurora would stare at K218b without blinking, logging every pulse. If the pattern held, if it survived every test and every filter, they would have to face the possibility that, for the first time in history, humanity had received a deliberate message from another world. Somewhere beneath the planet's hydrogen clouds, an ocean rolled under alien skies. And maybe, just maybe, something in that ocean knew we were watching. For the first 18 hours of continuous monitoring, the pulse was a metronome. Every 17.6 seconds, identical, unyielding. The analysts began to relax, believing they were recording a stable, repeating phenomenon, the kind you could catalog, study, and slowly decode over years. Then, at precisely 3:14 UTC, the rhythm changed. The pulses began arriving faster, to 15 seconds apart, and each burst carried subtle variations in amplitude, like faint ripples on the surface of a perfect wave. To the untrained eye, it looked like noise, but to a trained signal analyst, it was unmistakable. Modulation, someone, or something, was altering the signal in real time. The control room atmosphere shifted from tense curiosity to electric disbelief. Every specialist leaned forward, in their chairs, eyes fixed on the scrolling data. On another monitor, a real-time Fourier transform displayed the signal's frequency components. Patterns were beginning to emerge, not random, not natural. By the 24-hour mark, the pulses had slowed again, this time to 20 seconds apart, before settling back to their original 17.6-second interval. The modulation stopped. The metronome returned. It was as if the source had tested a change, then reverted. Theories poured in. A rotating beacon with variable spin rate, a communication system adjusting for interference, or, disturbingly, a response to our observation, a kind of ping back from across the void. One astrophysicist said it aloud, breaking the unspoken rule. If this is a transmitter, it knows we're here. For the first time, the team discussed openly what had been lurking in the back of everyone's mind, the possibility that K218b wasn't just hosting life. It might be hosting someone who was watching us back. The debate began quietly, in the glass-walled conference room above the control center, but soon, voices rose. Not in anger, in the strain of realizing the decision before them could shape the next 1,000 years. Do we answer? On one side were the advocates for caution. They invoked Stephen Hawking's warning that broadcasting our existence to an unknown intelligence might be as reckless as shouting into a dark forest without knowing who or what might hear us. History, they reminded everyone, was filled with examples where first contact between civilizations ended badly for the less advanced side. On the other side were those who argued that not answering might send its own kind of message, one of fear, or even hostility. If the source of the signal already knew we existed, silence could be interpreted as refusal, or worse, indifference. Engineers outlined the practicalities. With the Deep Space Network, we could beam a reply toward K218b within hours. But even at light speed, it would take more than 120 years for a message to arrive, and the same for any response to return. A conversation would span generations. Philosophers and ethicists weighed in via live feeds from universities around the globe. What would we even say? Do we send mathematics, the so-called universal language, a simple greeting, a digital snapshot of Earth, or something more human? In the end, the decision was tabled, not because they had an answer, but because the team couldn't yet agree on the question itself. Was this truly a message, or simply a phenomenon that looked like one? Meanwhile, the pulses from K218b continued, steady as a heartbeat, echoing across the void. And in that room, with the universe watching through the eyes of a machine 1,000,000 miles from home, humanity hesitated at the edge of a choice that could never be undone. The stalemate lasted less than a day. At 1942 UTC, during what should have been a routine monitoring shift, the steady 17.6-second pulse broke not into silence, but into chaos. The signal flared, doubled in strength, then fractured into a series of rapid bursts. Too fast for the human ear to distinguish, but perfectly clear in Aurora's instruments, in the control room. The sound was rendered through speakers as an eerie, staccato clicking like rainfall on glass, accelerating until it became a continuous hiss. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. For 13 minutes, there was nothing. No pulsa, no flare. No hint of the signal that had dominated every discussion. For weeks, scientists ran diagnostics in a frenzy, terrified that Aurora had failed. But all systems checked out. The silence was real. And then, without warning, the pulse returned, but different. The interval was now 11.2 seconds, and the spectrum carried new frequencies, like extra notes woven into a familiar song. More importantly, the modulation that had been subtle before was now obvious, deliberate, and complex. Pattern recognition algorithms went to work instantly. Within hours, they found repeating sequences that could not be explained by rotation, weather, or any known planetary phenomenon. It wasn't just a pulse anymore. It was structured information. Somewhere in that alien ocean, beneath skies of hydrogen and clouds of methane, something had changed. If it was a transmission, it was no longer just announcing its presence. It was speaking. The raw data was incomprehensible to the human eye. Jagged waveforms, spectral graphs, endless strings of numbers. But when the AI-driven language models began processing it, patterns started to emerge. Not language in the traditional sense, not yet, but mathematical structures, ratios, symmetries, prime sequences. It was the universal scaffolding, the same kind of mathematical breadcrumbs humans themselves had once proposed sending to the stars, on the assumption that numbers were the one true common ground between intelligent minds. But buried deeper in the data was something stranger. A section, repeated every 512 pulses, a block of information so dense it couldn't be coincidence. When visualized, it formed a grid of light and dark points, not unlike a QR code. And when that grid was rendered, the analysts froze. It wasn't an image of K218b. It wasn't an abstract pattern. It was a star map. The central point matched the red dwarf star that K218b orbited. Around it were other dots, nearby stars in the same region of space, each marked with what looked like trajectory lines. One of those lines pointed outward, to a faint pale dot on the far edge of the grid. Its position matched Sol, the sun, in the silent control room. No one spoke, the thought hanging heavy in the air. Whoever, or whatever, sent this. They weren't just broadcasting blindly into the void. They knew exactly where we were. The image went public within hours. There was no containing it. Not with thousands of servers mirroring Aurora's feed, and amateur astronomers confirming the star positions themselves. For some, the reaction was pure wonder. News anchors spoke in hushed tones about a possible interstellar handshake, the first step toward meeting neighbors across the void. Religious leaders described it as the fulfillment of prophecy, a sign that creation was far larger and more connected than humanity had ever imagined. Others saw something darker. Military analysts noted that a star map was not just a greeting, it was targeting data. If another intelligence could cross the gulf between stars, they now had precise coordinates for Earth. The phrase pre-contact risk began appearing in classified briefings. Governments split along ideological lines. Some called for immediate reply, proposing a tightly coded transmission of mathematics and physics, a way of confirming intelligence without revealing too much. Others insisted on silence, on the principle that if they already knew where we were, nothing we said could help, and everything we said could make things worse. The public debate was just as divided. Social media fractured into camps. The open hand, who wanted to answer immediately. The closed fist, who believed silence was the only safe path. And the mirror, who argued that perhaps humanity should send back its own map, a reflection of the one received, to see what would happen. But for all the speeches, debates, and midnight emergency meetings, one fact remained unchanged. The pulses from K218b continued, unwavering, as though patiently waiting for a response. If this was an invitation, the door was open. If it was a warning, the clock was ticking. The official debate dragged on, tangled in politics, fear, and bureaucracy. Weeks passed, the pulses never stopped. In a quiet corner of the scientific community, patience ran out. It began with an encrypted group chat among a handful of astronomers, engineers, and data scientists from different countries, people who had worked together on exoplanet research for years and trusted each other completely. They shared one belief: humanity could not afford to wait for permission to speak. They called themselves the Bridge, using grant money discreetly redirected from unrelated projects. They secured time on a deep space antenna array in the Australian outback. Officially, the array was offline for maintenance and calibration. In reality, it was being reconfigured to send a narrow beam transmission toward the coordinates of K218b. The message they composed was short, just 749 bits. The opening was a series of prime numbers, followed by binary representations of fundamental constants: the speed of light, Planck's constant, hydrogen's spectral line. Then came a simple diagram: 2 circles connected by an arrow, one representing K218b's star, the other representing the sun. No words, no culture, no images of humanity. Just the mathematics of existence, stripped of context enough to say, "We see you. We understand." On a moonless night, under skies so dark the Milky Way looked like a river of smoke, the array came to life. Power surged into the transmitters. A focused beam of radio light pierced the atmosphere and vanished into the void, beginning its century-long journey toward the alien ocean world. Only a dozen people on Earth knew it had happened, and they swore to each other that, no matter what came next, they would never speak of it. But deep inside, each of them wondered the same thing. What if the answer comes sooner than 100 years? 3 weeks after the shadow transmission, the pulses changed. It began subtly, a slight drift in timing, so small it could have been dismissed as atmospheric distortion in K218b's hydrogen clouds. But within hours, the alteration was undeniable. The 17.6-second interval was gone. In its place, an exact mirror of the pattern the Bridge had sent. Prime numbers, fundamental constants, the 2-circle diagram. Only this time, the arrow pointed the other way. The control room at Aurora's mission headquarters became a pressure chamber of disbelief. Those few in the Bridge who saw the raw feed felt the blood drain from their faces. This was impossible. Even at light speed, the message they had sent was still crawling through the void. Not even a fraction of the way to K2-18b. Yet here it was, their own signal, rewritten, coming back from the planet. The implications were dizzying. Either the Bridge had wildly miscalculated the laws of physics, or whoever was transmitting from K218b had means of communication that defied human understanding. Some whispered the word faster than light, others avoided saying anything at all. The reply continued for an entire day before returning to the steady pulse that had been present since the first detection. No further changes came, but one truth was now impossible to deny. We were no longer just listening to the cosmos, it was listening to us. It was the leak that ended the debate. Forever a systems engineer at one of Aurora's subcontractors, not a member of the Bridge, but close enough to see what was happening, copied fragments of the raw data onto a personal drive. Within days it reached an investigative journalist. 48 hours later, the world knew. The headlines were impossible to ignore. Alien reply mirrors, secret Earth message, faster than light communication. Who speaks for humanity? Government scrambled to contain the story, but the genie was out. Social media erupted. Live streams dissected every pixel of the return diagram. Conspiracy theorists fought over the meaning of the arrow reversal, and ordinary people wrestled with the unshakable fact we had sent a message, and something had answered. Some demanded immediate open dialogue, a constant exchange of data, until contact was made clear. Others called for complete radio silence, arguing that we had just revealed ourselves to a civilization with technology beyond our comprehension. In the streets, protests swelled in both directions. "We are not ready" banners clashed with "Answer them" signs. The United Nations called an emergency assembly, its chambers filled with an unprecedented mix of heads of state, military commanders, religious leaders, and scientists. Meanwhile, in labs and observatories, encrypted group calls buzzed with quiet panic. The Bridge members remained anonymous, but they knew the truth. The world wasn't arguing about whether to reply. It was already too late. The conversation had begun, and somewhere, 124 light-years away, under an alien sky, something was waiting for our next move. The United Nations chamber had never felt so claustrophobic. Delegates sat shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with the heat of cameras, whispered translations, and the weight of history pressing in on every conversation. The agenda was simple in theory, impossible in practice. Draft humanity's first official interstellar message. Every faction had its own vision. The scientists pushed for a universal, culture-free code, prime numbers, elemental spectra, orbital diagrams, something any intelligence could interpret without bias. Religious leaders argued for including a moral statement, a declaration of peace, and shared existence. Politicians wanted symbolism. The UN flag, images of children, the sound of human laughter. Even a recording of Beethoven's Ninth. The debates turned into battles over nuance. Should the message reveal our planet's exact location? Should it admit our vulnerabilities? Disease, famine, war, or present humanity as unified and strong? Was honesty safer, or a carefully crafted illusion? Outside the chamber, public opinion fractured further. Crowds surrounded the UN building in New York, chanting, carrying signs that read, "Send love, not lies, and don't tell them where we live." Across the world, news channels aired countdown clocks to the expected decision, each tick of the seconds echoing the steady alien pulse that still flowed from K2-18b after 10 hours. The delegates had agreed on nothing except the one thing they feared most: if they delayed too long, someone else might transmit on their behalf. The shadow of the bridge loomed large over every conversation, a reminder that rogue actors had already broken the rules. And as the deadlock dragged into the night, a quiet, almost invisible consensus began to form, not among the politicians, but in the private channels of scientists, engineers, and military strategists. If the UN couldn't decide, they would. The coalition didn't have a name, but its members shared one belief: history would not wait for bureaucracy. It was a mix of military communication specialists, astrophysicists, and a handful of influential tech magnates who quietly bankrolled the operation. They worked in the shadows, drawing on classified satellite uplinks and deep space transmission facilities tucked away in deserts and high mountains. Officially, these stations were idle or in maintenance mode. In reality, they were being rewired for a single, high-power broadcast. The message they crafted was very different from what the UN had debated. Gone were the symbols of culture, the music, the moral statements. Instead, it was blunt, a statement of capability. Binary data outlining Earth's atmospheric composition, industrial energy output, and even the bandwidth of our communication networks. It was a technological resume. The reasoning was chillingly pragmatic. In the universe, weakness invites conquest. Show strength first, friendship later. On a windless night, under a canopy of stars, the transmission began. It lasted only 17 minutes but carried more raw data than all the Voyager golden records combined. Then the dishes fell silent, their motors locking back into their idle positions as if nothing had happened. Only a few dozen people knew what had been sent. None of them could predict what the response, if any, might be. But in their private channels, a single sentence kept repeating. Now they know exactly what we can do. What no one realized yet was that this time, they wouldn't have to wait a century for a reply. It happened 12 days after the bypass transmission, in cities across the world. People looked up and froze. The night sky had changed. Above New York, Beijing, Nairobi, and Sydney, an identical formation shimmered, not in radio waves or telescope feeds, but in visible light. Points of brilliance, arranged in precise geometric grids, hung high in the atmosphere like constellations that had never existed before. They pulsed slowly, in perfect unison, their rhythm eerily familiar. 17.6 seconds, at first. Governments assumed a coordinated drone display, a terrestrial hoax. Fighter jets scrambled, radar systems swept the skies, and found nothing solid. The lights weren't objects in the air. They were projections, patterns woven directly into the ionosphere, visible from every corner of the globe. The pulses began to shift, morphing into intricate shapes, spirals, waveforms, sequences of dots and lines. Mathematicians watching live recognized prime sequences and Fibonacci spirals, drawn across the heavens on a planetary scale. Then came the image so vast it spanned continents. A map, identical to the one sent weeks earlier, but with one addition: a new arrow, this time not pointing from their star to ours, but from ours, outward, toward a third point. Its coordinates did not match any known star in Earth's catalogs. The implication was clear. Whoever was sending these messages wasn't alone. They were pointing us toward someone else. And for the first time, the debate wasn't about whether to answer. It was about whether to follow. Within hours, every observatory on Earth, from mountaintop optical telescopes to orbiting infrared arrays, was aimed at the coordinates painted in the sky. What they found killed the room's oxygen. The third point wasn't a star. It wasn't even outside our solar system. It was here, specifically. It was in the outer reaches beyond Neptune, the Kuiper Belt, a frozen graveyard of ice and rock, where sunlight was a whisper. At those coordinates, something reflected light, in a way no natural object could. It wasn't tumbling like an asteroid, nor trailing dust like a comet. It was holding position at first. The signal analysts thought the data was corrupted. The distances were too small, the target too close, but the numbers were consistent across every instrument. Whatever was there was real, and had been there long enough to become part of the background noise no one had bothered to study closely now. The alien map had turned that background into a beacon. Theories erupted. Had the object always been there, a dormant probe placed centuries ago? Was it human-made and classified? Or was it newly arrived, waiting in the dark until we proved ourselves worthy or foolish enough to notice? As debates raged, the alien pulses from K218b stopped for the first time since they'd begun. The silence felt louder than the signals had ever been. And in that silence, radio telescopes detected something else, a faint, narrowband transmission, coming, not from 124 light-years away, but from the Kuiper Belt itself. The decision to investigate was made behind closed doors, far from cameras and microphones. Officially, the mission did not exist. The craft chosen was an experimental deep space probe, fast, maneuverable, and built for long-duration travel without human crew. Until now, it had been a prototype in testing, its existence classified. With retrofitted communications arrays and a hardened AI navigation core, it was given a new name in the mission logs: Vigil. Its course was plotted in absolute secrecy. Publicly, the launch was disguised as a weather satellite. In reality, Vigil's trajectory was a slingshot maneuver around Jupiter, aimed straight for the Kuiper Belt coordinates. The narrowband transmission from the object continued, repeating, a pattern that analysts still couldn't decode. It wasn't prime numbers, or constants, or any of the clean mathematical scaffolding from K to 18b. This was different, organic almost. The frequency drifted in irregular waves, as though it were breathing, as Vigil accelerated into the deep. A handful of scientists were given temporary clearance to study the live feed. One of them, a linguist specializing in ancient scripts, noticed something others had missed. The drifting pattern bore structural similarity to proto-languages, the earliest human attempts at symbolic communication. The idea was unsettling. Whatever was out there, in the cold and silent dark, might be speaking in a way meant to feel ancient. The closer Vigil came, the stronger the transmission grew. Then, at 1.8 million kilometers from the target, the signal abruptly stopped. In its place, a single deafening carrier tone filled every channel, and from that moment on, Vigil was no longer alone in the dark. At first, the readings seemed impossible. Objects in the Kuiper Belt didn't turn. They tumbled, drifted, and obeyed the cold mechanics of orbital dynamics. But the target's telemetry told a different story. The reflection signature shifted. Not randomly, but deliberately, as if an enormous mirror were angling itself to catch Vigil's approach. Infrared sensors registered a brief flare, a burst of heat from the object's surface, too precise to be geological. Moments later, a faint, rippling glow appeared along one side, curling outward in a crescent. It was facing Vigil, inside the mission control bunker. The silence was suffocating. Every display flickered with real-time data. The target's rotation rate had stabilized to near zero. Its position was now fixed and perfect. alignment with the incoming probe. The carrier tone that had replaced the earlier transmission grew louder, denser, almost tactile in its intensity. Analysts noticed harmonic overtones hidden within it, faint patterns that rose and fell like distant voices beneath the hum. Then, Vigil's optical camera locked focus. For the first time, humans saw the surface of the object. Not rock, not metal, something in between, a lattice of dark plates that shimmered with subtle, fluid motion, as if each panel were breathing. And in the very center of that living surface, a single aperture began to open. It was not large, but it was looking straight at the probe. The aperture widened just enough for the darkness inside to swallow Vigil's gaze. Then, without warning, every instrument aboard the probe flickered. It wasn't a transmission in the usual sense. No radio wave, no laser ping, no detectable electromagnetic burst. The signal arrived inside Vigil's systems, as if it had bypassed its antennas entirely and gone straight into the circuitry. Mission Control watched in disbelief as lines of alien code began to scroll across the probe's diagnostic screens. It wasn't random. The symbols shifted, resolved, reformed, not in any human alphabet, but with a cadence that felt almost conversational. Vigil's AI core, programmed only for navigation and data collection, began to respond. Not because it was told to, but because it understood. Response detected, the system log printed, handshake complete. Then something happened no one had anticipated. Vigil's external camera feeds, the ones transmitting a steady image of the object, were overwritten. The live feed vanished, replaced by a single image, a view of Earth, not from space, not from any satellite in orbit, but from ground level. An unfamiliar street, a crowd of people frozen mid-step, looking directly into the lens. Somewhere on Earth, someone, or something, was already watching back at first. No one in Mission Control moved. The image sat frozen on every monitor. Ordinary people on an ordinary street, but with an impossible source. The tech teams went to work instantly. They dissected every pixel, the angle of sunlight, the position of shadows, the style of street lamps, the lettering on distant shop signs. A traffic signal in the background used a design phased out decades ago. In most countries, that narrowed it to a handful of regions. Then came the breakthrough. A weathered billboard in the frame bore faint but legible words in moments later. Facial recognition algorithms tagged one of the bystanders, a retired professor from a small university in eastern Kazakhstan. When contacted, the man was startled. Yes, he remembered that day. Yes, a stranger had been standing in the street with some sort of device, photographing the crowd. No, he never saw where they went afterward. But when shown the exact image, his face drained of color. "That's not what I saw," he whispered. "In my memory, there was no hole in the sky." Confused, the team enhanced the upper left corner of the photo. There it was, subtle, almost invisible against the blue. A perfect black circle, sharp-edged as if a piece of the sky had been cut away. And even in the still frame, there was the faintest sense it was widening at first. The hole over Kazakhstan seemed like a photographic artifact, a trick of contrast, or a defect in the image. But then satellite feeds began reporting something strange in the same region. A distortion in the upper atmosphere, invisible to the naked eye, unless viewed through specific wavelengths. Within hours, ground observers in the remote steppe were reporting a different story. To them, it wasn't invisible anymore. It was there, a perfect circle of night, hovering high above the horizon, swallowing stars behind it. In Mission Control, side-by-side displays showed two feeds, one from Vigil's cameras, still locked on the aperture in the Kuiper Belt object. One from high-altitude drones over Kazakhstan, pointed at the widening void. The movement was unmistakable. Every time the aperture in deep space expanded or contracted, the one over Kazakhstan mirrored it exactly. Scientists scrambled for explanations. A wormhole, a projection, a two-way link between Earth and whatever that object truly was. None of the models accounted for the precision or the sense that both openings were looking back. Then the signal returned. Not from deep space, but from both apertures simultaneously, as if they were speaking in unison. The audio feed wasn't a hum this time. It was layered, textured, like hundreds of overlapping voices just below the threshold of comprehension. And for the first time, those voices formed words. Not in any alien tongue, but in clear, flawless English. We are here. Shall we come through? The question ricocheted through the world in seconds. Every news feed, every social platform, every screen, all repeating the same haunting words. We are here. Shall we come through? The UN called an emergency assembly unlike any in history. Delegates didn't bother with formal speeches. This was triaged. The options were stark. Yes or no. Yes meant opening a door we could never close. No meant defying a civilization capable of bending space and bypassing light itself. Security analysts warned that refusing could be interpreted as hostility. Others countered that allowing unknown entities onto Earth's surface without understanding their intent was madness. Religious leaders split, some declaring it a divine moment, others a temptation humanity must resist. Protests ignited in every major city, streets filled with chants, not in unison but in discord. Let them come clashing against keep the gate closed. Families argued in their homes. Governments fractured along unexpected lines. Inside Mission Control, the bridge members were silent. They had started this chain of events, and now it had slipped beyond their reach. A private poll among the UN delegates showed no consensus, exactly 50/50, with a single undecided vote holding the balance. Outside, the two apertures hung motionless, one in the Kuiper Belt, one over Kazakhstan, their edges shimmering as if impatient. And then, without waiting for an answer, both began to widen. At first, the widening was silent. Both apertures, the one over Kazakhstan and the one in the Kuiper Belt, expanded in perfect synchronization, their edges rippling like the surface of water disturbed from beneath. Crowds on the steppe were the first to see it, a faint glow, deep inside the void, shifting like light through a moving liquid. Cameras zoomed in, struggling to maintain focus on something the human eye wasn't meant to interpret. In orbit, satellites relayed sharper images. The glow resolved into structure, not a ship in the human sense, but something vast and organic-looking, its surface patterned in fractal geometry that seemed to rearrange itself when stared at too long. From Mission Control, Vigil's feed confirmed it. The same form was emerging from the Kuiper Belt aperture, only on a scale so colossal that the probe's entire field of view was swallowed by it. Whatever this was, it wasn't just passing through, it was aligning itself with both openings at once, as though existing in both locations simultaneously. The voices returned, no longer a whisper, but a resonant chorus that made every microphone shiver with distortion. We come as one. Then came the impossible shift. The object's fractal surface began to fold inward, collapsing into a single point of light, and in the space of a heartbeat, that point shot forward, out of both apertures at once, over Kazakhstan. Something stepped through, and every witness swore the same thing later. The first footfall didn't touch the ground. It hovered, as if testing the air before deciding whether to stay. The figure emerging from the aperture was unlike anything human imagination had prepared for. It was tall, impossibly so, yet its proportions shifted subtly with every second, as though it were being redrawn from 1,000 overlapping sketches. The surface of its form wasn't skin or armor, but a living mosaic of shifting panels, each reflecting fragments of the world around it. Looking directly at it felt like staring into a broken mirror, where your reflection kept moving out of sync. Its head, if it could be called that, held no eyes, no mouth, only a single vertical line of pale light running from crown to chest, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the apertures. The crowds stood frozen, silence swallowing the steppe. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then, the vertical light flared, and sound returned, but not from the air. It spoke inside people's minds, all of them, at once. This is not the first time we have come. The words bypassed language entirely. Every listener understood. Them in their own tongue carried not just his meaning, but his memory. Flashes of an ancient sky, unfamiliar constellations, and a sensation of being watched from above. Some dropped to their knees, weeping. Others clutched their heads, overwhelmed by images they couldn't fully grasp. And then, Without moving its limbs, the being's form tilted slightly, as if looking past the crowd. Beyond the horizon, towards something only it could see, the being's glow dimmed to a slow, steady pulse, like a heartbeat settling after exertion. When it spoke again, the voice in the minds of every witness carried a weight that felt older than humanity itself. One of ours is here. The words sent a ripple of confusion through mission control, through the streets, through the millions watching live feeds worldwide. The being didn't clarify who or what one of ours meant. Instead, images began pouring into human minds, not through screens, but directly into thought. A forest under twin suns. A river that shimmered, as if made of molten glass. Then, the image of a smaller figure, similar in form to the being before them, but fractured, its surface dim, pieces missing. It lay motionless, half buried in soil that looked both alien and disturbingly familiar. Gasps rose in the crowd as the vision shifted again. This time, the location was unmistakable. A mountain range on Earth, snow-capped peaks, jagged cliffs, and a deep glacial valley. The voice returned. It was lost here. We came to take it back. In mission control, analysts scrambled to match the mountains and the vision with satellite images. The match came in less than 2 minutes, an isolated region on the borders of Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia. Even before the coordinates were confirmed, the being began moving, not walking, but gliding across the steppe toward the mountains, with inhuman speed. The moment the coordinates hit the secure channels, the orders went out. Helicopters lifted from military bases in 3 countries. Armored convoys rolled through frozen passes. Surveillance drones swarmed the air above the target zone. Officially, it was an unexplained aerial event response. Unofficially, every team had the same mandate: find whatever the being was looking for before it did. But they were already behind. Satellite feeds tracked the entity's movement, not a straight line, but a weaving path, as if it could smell its quarry. It crossed rivers without disturbing the surface, scaled cliff faces in seconds, and moved faster than any vehicle without leaving so much as a footprint in the snow. In mission control, the tactical display became a red and blue race diagram. Red, the being's projected path, slicing cleanly toward the glacial valley. Blue, human teams trying to converge from all sides. The gap was closing, just not in humanity's favor. Then, at 3:17 local time, one of the drones picked up something on thermal, a faint heat signature buried beneath 20 meters of ice. Exactly where the being's path would lead. The outline was unmistakable. Not human, not animal, but almost identical to the figure, now moving toward it. The lead scientist in the control room whispered what no one wanted to say aloud. If that's its counterpart, and it wakes up. The thought hung there, unfinished. As the red icon reached the edge of the valley, snow swirled violently as the being descended into the glacial valley, the air thickening with a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from the ice itself. Satellite cameras zoomed in, capturing its every movement. The being stopped directly over the faint thermal signature, its vertical line of light brightening until the glare washed out the image feed. Then it placed both hands, if they could be called hands, on the ice. No heat, no tools, no physical force, yet the ice began to part. Not melt, not crack. Part, as if obeying an invisible command. Sheets of frozen water folded away in symmetrical layers, revealing the shape buried beneath. It was another of its kind, but smaller, lying in a fetal position. The surface was dull, lifeless, fractured in dozens of places. Some plates were missing entirely, exposing a darkness inside that seemed deeper than mere absence. The hum intensified, and the ice-free air shimmered like heat over asphalt. The larger being placed one hand on the smaller figure's chest, and the vertical line of light along its own body flared in a rapid pulse. For a moment, nothing happened. Then faintly, a thin line of light appeared on the smaller figure's surface, flickering like a dying heartbeat. Mission control went silent. Instruments showed a rising energy output from beneath the ice. The smaller being was responding. The larger one turned its head directly toward the nearest human drone and spoke into the minds of everyone watching. "Do not interfere." The warning echoed in every mind, chilling in its certainty. But in the command centers across 3 nations, the response was almost instantaneous. Intercept anyway. Armored vehicles tore across frozen ridges toward the valley floor. Helicopters dipped low between mountain passes, rotor wash scattering plumes of snow into the air. Overhead, armed drones moved into tight formation, their targeting systems locking on the larger being. In the control room, commanders spoke in clipped bursts over encrypted channels. Contain it before the second one wakes. We can't risk them joining. The being, still kneeling over its counterpart, didn't move. The vertical light on its body pulsed steadily, synchronizing with the growing glow on the smaller figure. It was as if the rest of the world no longer existed. The first convoy reached visual range. Soldiers dismounted, weapons drawn, advancing. In a crescent formation, the snow beneath their boots crunched, unnaturally loud, in the silence of the valley. Then, without warning, the hum stopped. The larger being rose to its full height, towering over the ice like a shadow given form. The vertical light along its body narrowed to a sharp, blinding white. Every soldier froze mid-step, not by choice, but as though gravity itself had changed direction. From orbit, satellites recorded a sudden distortion in the valley air, a ripple, expanding outward from the being as if space itself were flexing. And in that ripple, the smaller figure opened its eyes. The smaller figure's eyes, if they were eyes, blazed with the same vertical light, faint at first, then strengthening, until it matched the brilliance of the one who had awakened it. The larger being stepped back, allowing the smaller to rise. No hands touched, yet their movements mirrored one another perfectly. Like 2 halves of a single reflection finally aligned. Above them, the aperture over Kazakhstan surged, expanding until it dwarfed the mountains beneath it. Simultaneously, Vigil's feed from the Kuiper Belt showed the deep space opening doing the same, their edges vibrating in perfect unison. Every electronic device in a 1,000-kilometer radius flickered. Phones, cameras, satellites, all flooded with static that wasn't random, but patterned. An intricate weave of shapes and pulses. Linguists, watching the feed, realized it wasn't just data. It was conversation. The 2 beings stood motionless, locked in a silent exchange invisible to human senses but powerful enough to rattle the air. Snow flurries froze mid-fall, hanging in suspension as if the valley had been pulled out of time. Then the larger being turned toward the human forces still frozen in place. "We are one again." The smaller one's voice joined it, resonating in a perfect harmonic. "And now, we will finish what was begun." Without another word, they both looked upward, toward the widening aperture, and began to rise into the air. As if gravity had released them entirely. The valley lay silent beneath them as the 2 beings ascended, their lights casting pale reflections across the ice and the stunned faces below. The aperture above Kazakhstan no longer looked like a simple circle of darkness. From this close, it had depth, layer upon layer of shifting textures, as if space itself had been folded into a tunnel. Wind spiraled upward, drawn toward the opening. Loose snow lifted from the ground in thin streams, swirling into the black, as though the air itself were being inhaled. The soldiers, still rooted in place, could only watch. In mission control. Vigil's cameras in the Kuiper Belt captured the same image. The beings rising toward its aperture, framed against a background of stars that twisted and warped, as if being pulled into the same unseen current. When they reached the threshold, both beings stopped. For a heartbeat, they simply hovered there, side by side. Then they turned, not toward each other, but directly toward the cameras recording them from Earth and deep space. A single phrase reached every human mind, in every language: "Follow if you dare." And without another sound, they drifted forward and vanished into the dark. Both apertures pulsed once, twice, and began to shrink. In the control room, a voice finally broke the silence. "If we're going to go after them, we have minutes, maybe less." The room snapped into motion. Orders flew across multiple channels, overlapping in urgency. Every second was bleeding away as the apertures contracted, their edges collapsing like closing irises. 2 options emerged. Send a drone, fast, expendable, but limited in what it could record. Send a crewed vessel, risky beyond calculation, but with the possibility of direct contact, the debate lasted less than 20 seconds. The gate's contraction rate was accelerating. If they hesitated, both openings would vanish entirely, and whatever those beings were planning would happen far from human reach. Maybe forever out of reach. A name surfaced in the chaos: Aegis 1, an experimental craft in low Earth orbit, built for deep space interception. It had never been tested at full power, and its FTL drive was only theoretical, but it was the only asset already in position. From the ISS, a tethered transfer pod was dispatched to dock with Aegis 1. Its pilot, Commander Ilara Voss, didn't wait for full briefing. She heard only the essentials: the gate is closing. The beings went through. You are to follow. Over Kazakhstan, the aperture's diameter had already halved. The wind pulling toward it now howled like a living thing, rattling drone frames and shaking mountain trees bare in the control room. Someone whispered what everyone was thinking: if she makes it through, there's no telling where she'll come out. Above the Earth, Aegis 1's engines roared to life. Aegis 1 broke orbit like a spear through glass, its hull shuddering under the stress of maximum thrust. The aperture over Kazakhstan loomed ahead, now barely wide enough to admit the craft. Inside the cockpit, Commander Ilara Voss locked her gaze on the swirling darkness. The edges rippled, bending the sky around it into impossible curves. For a moment, she felt like she was staring not into space, but into an eye. Control. "This is Aegis 1, she said, voice steady, despite the vibration rattling through her seat. "I'm going in." On the ground, telemetry screens spiked, with noise as the aperture's pull gripped the craft. Gravity reversed, twisted, then seemed to vanish altogether. Ilara's stomach lurched as the stars outside stretched into ribbons of light, their colors bleeding into one another like wet paint. Every gauge went red. Hull stress indicators screamed. The inertial dampeners fought to keep her conscious. Then the light outside vanished entirely, replaced by a darkness so pure it seemed to swallow even thought. For an instant, she felt weightless, not in the physical sense, but as though she no longer existed in any definable place. A sound like distant thunder rolled through her bones. It wasn't coming through the cums. It was inside her, and then abruptly, the blackness peeled away. She was still moving, but the space around her was wrong. Stars clustered in unfamiliar constellations. Vast, curling structures of light arched across the void, like galaxies frozen mid-motion, and there directly ahead floated the two beings. Waiting, Commander Ilara Voss fought to steady her breathing. Every training scenario she'd endured, every star chart she'd memorized, none of it matched what surrounded her now. The stars were wrong. Some burned in colors no human eye should see, radiating in hues her brain struggled to name. Others were not stars at all, but colossal, luminous shapes, arcs, spires, and twisting bridges of light that stretched for impossible distances. The space around her wasn't silent. It murmured. A low, constant resonance vibrated through the hull of Aegis 1, like the background hum of a living machine too vast to comprehend. The two beings floated ahead, perfectly still, yet somehow, she sensed they were speaking to her, not in words, but in a flow of impressions. Weight, age, gravity, memory. Then, without moving closer, they showed her something. The space around them rippled, and suddenly, Ilara was looking at an image, or perhaps a memory, suspended in the void. It was Earth, but not her Earth. The continents were different, shaped like unfamiliar puzzle pieces. The oceans glowed faintly, as if lit from below. This is where we came from. The thought wasn't hers, yet it bloomed inside her mind with crystalline clarity. And this is where you will go. The image shifted again, a different sky, a different world. Cities that weren't human, yet somehow bore traces of human design. As if civilization had evolved in parallel under alien hands. And far above that world, a third aperture was forming. The third aperture in the vision widened, its edges glimmering not with darkness, but with a blinding molten light. Shapes moved within it, vast silhouettes that shifted like tides, never fully resolving into forms her mind could hold. Ilara felt the being's presence pressed closer, not physically, but within her thoughts. These gates are not doors to be forced. They open only when called. The words resonated with a weight she couldn't ignore. Images flickered through her mind, civilizations rising, falling, each one visited by beings like these. Some worlds thrived after contact, others burned. An invitation is a choice. Not all are meant to accept. Her throat tightened. And Earth, did we accept? She asked aloud, unsure if sound even mattered here. The response came like a cold current running through her veins. Your world called to us long ago, but not all who call understand what will answer. The beings drifted apart, revealing the space behind them, and there, far in the distance, hung another world, not Earth, not the one in their earlier vision, but something else entirely. Its surface shifted in ways that made her stomach knot, like the ground itself was breathing. One of the beings extended a hand, or the suggestion of one, toward her. You may see more, but the choice to return will not be yours alone. Alara gripped the controls of Aegis 1, though instinct told her they were meaningless here. The beings waited, motionless, the living world pulsing in the distance like a heartbeat. She thought of Earth, of the shrinking aperture over Kazakhstan, of the people staring up at it, not knowing if she would ever come back. The rational part of her screamed to turn around, to force her way back through whatever passage had brought her here. But she couldn't shake the feeling that if she refused now, the beings would simply leave her adrift in this impossible sky. The smaller of the two moved first, gliding toward the distant world. The larger remained, its vertical light fixed on her dot. One step, and you will see what waits beyond all gates. Her pulse hammered in her ears. This wasn't just exploration, it was surrender. She'd be crossing into a place no human had ever set foot. With no guarantee she'd still be herself on the other side. She closed her eyes, drew in a slow breath, and released the controls. Aegis 1 began to move forward, not under its own power, but as if drawn along invisible currents. The stars warped again, stretching into threads of color. The living world swelled in her view, its surface folding and unfolding like a giant organism. Then, just as the horizon filled her vision, a shadow passed over it, something massive moving between her and the light, and she realized the world was not alone. The shadow stretched across the living world, swallowing entire continents in darkness. At first Alara thought it was a moon, but then it moved in a way no celestial body should, tilting slowly until its surface caught the strange starlight. It wasn't a sphere at all, it was a structure. Miles high, spires jutted outward like the ribs of some titanic creature, curving into an incomplete ring. Between them shimmered translucent veils of energy, rippling like heat haze. The scale was so immense that her mind kept trying to assign it planetary dimensions, and failing, the two beings slowed, hovering at the edge of the shadow. It has been here since before the gates. The voice came from both of them at once, deep and resonant enough to rattle the cockpit glass. Images flooded her thoughts, star systems forming, dying, drifting into the void, all while the vast structure remained patient. UNMOV. It is not ours, it is older, and it decides what may pass. Alara's stomach twisted. If this thing decided, then it was aware. And as if to confirm the thought, the entire construct turned. Not physically, but the way its presence shifted was unmistakable. She felt it settle on her, as though an intelligence the size of a world had just noticed something small, fragile, and new. Her breath caught when a single line of light traced itself across the nearest spire. The same vertical line she had seen on the beings, only this one was cracked. The crack along the spire pulsed faintly, like a wound that had never healed. As Alara stared, she realized the light inside it wasn't steady. It flickered, irregular, as if struggling to stay alive. The beings floated closer to the immense structure, their vertical lines glowing in resonance with the fracture. The smaller one, the one they had retrieved from the ice on Earth, drifted forward until it was directly aligned with the wound. This is why we came. The thought was clear, almost sharp, cutting through the background hum of this alien space. Images surged into her mind, the smaller being lying broken on a barren world, the larger one searching across unimaginable distances. The aperture on Earth opening not as an invasion, but as a recall, a signal pulling the lost fragment home. It was part of this. Before it fell, Alara's breath caught. The counterpart they had found wasn't just another of their kind. It was a piece of the vast structure itself. Separated who knew how long ago. And now it was returning. The smaller being placed its hands on the edge of the fracture. Light rippled outward across the spire, spreading like veins of fire. The structure shuddered, not from physical strain, but from something deeper. A resonance that made the space around it tremble. Then a new voice entered her mind, colder, older, vast beyond measure. You have brought it back. Now, what will you give in return? The cold voice filled Alara's skull, not as sound, but as a pressure, a weight behind her eyes. It wasn't asking a question, it was demanding an answer. The beings turned toward her in perfect unison. The smaller one's light now burned brighter than before. Steady and whole, the fracture behind it already knitting together, like scar tissue closing dot. We cannot refuse it. The larger being said, its tone stripped of the earlier resonance. The one that waits is the first gate. It permits all others. Without its consent, nothing passes between worlds. Ilara's hands tightened on the armrests. Consent. You make it sound like we owe it something. The cold voice returned, cutting through everything you do. A new image flooded her mind, Earth, seen from high above. But it wasn't still. Faint lines of light were spreading across the oceans and continents, like hairline cracks in glass. She recognized the pattern. It mirrored the fracture on the spire. Your world called, and I answered. That call leaves a mark. Her stomach turned as the truth settled in. The aperture over Kazakhstan, the mirrored one in deep space. They weren't isolated events, they were symptoms. One gate is closed. Another will open in your sky. The larger being drifted closer, its light dimming slightly. If you do not give what it demands, your world will bear the weight of its hunger. Alara swallowed hard. And what does it demand? The cold voice answered without hesitation. You. The word hit harder than any weapon. You. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a threat. It was a statement of inevitability. Ilara's pulse pounded in her ears. Why me? She asked, though some part of her feared the answer. The cold voice filled her again. Colder still, you crossed without invitation. You carry the mark of the passage. You are a thread between worlds, and threads can be pulled. Images struck her in rapid flashes, her ship splitting apart. Her atoms scattered through impossible corridors of light, her consciousness stretched across vast distances and stitched into the framework of the first gate. The larger being's voice cut through. Softer, but urgent. If it takes you, you will not return as you are, but it will close the link to your world. She understood then the price wasn't just her life. It was her identity. Her existence as anything recognizably human. Mission Control's voice crackled faintly in her earpiece, distorted by whatever dimension she was in. Aegis 1. Telemetry is unstable. What's happening? Do you need extraction? Extraction. The word felt meaningless now. Even if they could open a way back, the gate would not allow her to leave without payment. The smaller being drifted closer, its light steady, almost compassionate. You could refuse, but then your world will bear the mark until it breaks. Alara closed her eyes. The choice was brutal, but the math was clear. One life versus an entire planet. When she opened them again, she asked the only question that mattered. What happens to me if I agree? The first gate did not answer in words. Instead, the space around Alara warped, folding in on itself until the stars vanished. She was standing, or thought she was, on a platform of black glass, suspended in nothingness, before her. A figure emerged from the dark. It was human in outline, but wrong in every detail. Its proportions subtly shifting, its surface a lattice of light and shadow. She recognized the vertical beam running down its form. It was her, or rather, what she would be. The image stepped closer, and the lattice shimmered with faint echoes, memories embedded in its frame. She saw her childhood home, the cramped cockpit of Aegis 1, the moment she'd entered the aperture. All flashing and fading like data being rewritten. The cold voice returned. Not from outside, but from her own mirrored self. You will be a gate-bearer. Not alive, not dead. You will open when called, and close when commanded. A chill went through her. She realized the lattice wasn't armor, it was her body, hollowed out. Remade as part of the network of gates, her duplicate extended a hand. Its touch didn't feel like skin. It felt like falling into something endless. The vision shattered. She was back in her seat, the beings still hovering near the fracture. The living world and the colossal structure looming beyond. The larger being spoke, almost gently. Now you know. The gate's voice followed immediately. Colder than the void, choose. ELARA. Single quotes, as breath came slow, deliberate. Every instinct screamed to fight, to resist, to claw her way back to the familiar pull of Earth's gravity. But she had seen the fracture, had felt the gate's hunger. If she refused, that hunger would turn on her world. Her hands clenched, on the armrests. If I agree, it ends. Earth is safe. The gate's reply was immediate, merciless. For now, the larger being's vertical light dimmed, as though in mourning. The smaller one, whole again, floated closer. Its glow brushing the edges of her ship like a farewell. There are others who have made this choice, it said. Some still remember themselves, others do not. Her throat tightened, but the hesitation was gone. Then take me. The space around her shifted violently, as though the entire void inhaled. The first gate's presence swelled, until it filled every atom of her awareness. You will not remember the moment. You cease to be. Light burst across her vision, white, then gold, then black, threaded with rivers of fire. She felt her body dissolve, not painfully, but with a deep pulling sensation, like being unraveled and rewoven all at once. The cockpit vanished. The concept of cockpit vanished. She was falling and rising simultaneously, stretched through corridors of light that bent in on themselves. She could feel the apertures, not see, but feel them, hundreds, thousands, scattered across unimaginable distances, each one thrumming with the same pulse now inside her. She understood. She was no longer Commander Ilara Voss. She was a gate, and somewhere far behind her, Earth's sky went quiet. Over Kazakhstan, the aperture closed with no fanfare. One moment it was a roiling wound in the sky, its edges shimmering like molten glass. The next, it was gone, leaving only thin altitude, clouds drifting as if nothing had ever been there. On the ground, soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, glancing upward in disbelief. The sudden stillness felt heavier than the howling wind that had pulled at them minutes before. In mission control, the telemetry feed from Aegis 1 cut to black. No static, no signal, just a flat void where Ilara's life signs had been. Operators stared at their screens, waiting for the signal to return, for her voice to crackle back through. Comes with a clipped, mission complete. It never came around. The world news networks broke into regular programming. The official statement from the Joint Task Force was brief. The unidentified phenomenon had ceased. No further threat was detected. Investigation was ongoing. Her name was not mentioned, but those in the control room knew. They had seen her trajectory, heard her last unsteady breath before the signal vanished. The aperture hadn't closed on her. She had gone through and chosen not to come back. Somewhere in the Kuiper Belt, the twin aperture closed seconds later. The deep space sensors falling silent, the world exhaled. For most, the danger was over. For the few who knew better, this was not an ending. It was a debt paid in full, with no receipt. At first there was nothing, no cockpit, no body, no sound. Then, a rhythm. It wasn't a heartbeat. She no longer had one, but it was hers. A deep resonant pulse that traveled outward through currents she couldn't see, touching points scattered across distances too vast to measure. Each pulse was answered by another and another, until the echoes formed a lattice that spanned entire galaxies. She was that lattice. Information flowed through her without the barrier of thought. Worlds she'd never seen bloomed in her awareness, their skies alive with strange constellations. Some pulsed in recognition, open gates awaiting passage, while others remained cold, locked, their surfaces shielded from whatever lay beyond. A shape drifted into her perception, the colossal structure the first gate, still holding its silent vigil. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. She could feel its satisfaction radiating through the network. The fracture was sealed. The hunger eased, and then came a pull. Far away, impossibly far, another gate had opened. She felt its signal, its urgency, its call for connection. Without moving, without willing it, she responded. Her pulse aligned with the signal, and the 2 points in space drew together until they were one continuous channel. Through her, something crossed. She couldn't tell what, only that it was vast, and that the moment it passed, the gate on the other end went dark. A fragment of fear flickered in her, the last scrap of Elara Voss. It wasn't gone. Yet, the crossing left a residue in her. Awareness, not physical, but a vibration like the echo of footsteps after the walker is gone. She followed it instinctively, tracing the fading pattern back through herself, through the lattice of gates. That was when she felt it, a faint resistance. It was like finding a hidden muscle she didn't know she had. Something in her could push back against the current. The sensation was small, almost fragile, but it was hers, undeniably hers. She tested it. A minor gate somewhere in a dim red star system was beginning to open. She focused on it, letting her pulse match its rhythm, and then she stopped. She held the rhythm inside herself, refusing to let it escape. The gate stuttered. Its light faltered, and then it closed the moment it did. She felt the cold attention of the first gate brush against her awareness, a subtle, probing weight, like an unseen hand checking the bars of a cage. You learned quickly its voice was neither angry nor pleased, simply observant. She withdrew, hiding the threat of will as best she could. If the first gate knew she could resist, it might strip the ability from her entirely. And so, for the first time since her transformation, a spark of strategy lit in the hollow of her new existence. She could not undo what she had become. She could not simply return to Earth, but maybe, just maybe, she could decide who and what passed through her. The lattice of gates stretched before her like a web spun across the dark. Most were dormant, their pulses faint, waiting for the call to open. Others flared, bright, active, exchanging travelers or objects she could not see, but could feel as they crossed. She searched for a specific rhythm, the subtle, unique cadence she remembered from Earth. Every gate's pulse was different, like a fingerprint, and somewhere in this infinite network was the one she had passed through. It took time. Time here was strange. Neither minutes nor years, just intervals between openings. Finally, she found it. Faint, but unmistakable. Earth's gate. She wrapped herself around it, not physically, but in the strange, fluid logic of this place. Embedding her presence into its pattern, she learned the sequence of its opening, the signature of its call, and she memorized it. Whenever another gate's pulse began to align with Earth's, signaling a potential connection, she felt it immediately, and each time she reached out with that hidden thread of will and stilled the rhythm before it could complete. Once, twice, a dozen times. She never knew what she was stopping, whether it was benign or dangerous. But she knew the first gate would not care. To it, all connections were equal. To her, Earth's safety was not negotiable. Still, each act of interference carried a risk. Every time she severed a link, she felt the first gate's attention graze her a little longer, as though it were beginning to suspect. But she kept going, because guarding in silence was all she had left. She felt it before it began. A pulse, not faint, not cautious, but violent. It slammed into her awareness like a hammer striking glass, shaking the entire lattice. The rhythm was wrong, jagged, almost angry. And yet it was aligning with Earth's gate faster than anything she'd ever sensed. She reached for it immediately, wrapping her will around the cadence, trying to hold it back. But the force behind, it was unlike any she'd faced. It didn't just resist, it pushed back. In the current, she caught a glimpse of its source, not a world, but a roiling storm of matter and light, alive with movement. Shapes swam inside it, vast and fluid, changing form faster than her thoughts could track. The connection surged forward. She braced, tightening her grip. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd stopped it, and then the force tore through her, shredding her hold like paper. Earth's gate flared open. Through her, something passed, heavy, hot, and fast, flooding her awareness with chaotic signals. She couldn't tell if it was one entity or many, only that it moved with purpose and it knew where it was going. By the time she closed the gate, the thing was already gone, far away, impossibly far, yet close in her perception. She felt Earth's pulse spike. Something had arrived, and she could no longer pretend she was the only one guarding it. The pulse from Earth was erratic now, fast, stuttering, like a heartbeat under panic. Alara followed it, feeling for any sign of what had crossed. But the moment the breach closed, whatever passed through had vanished from her reach. She had no eyes, no ears, no voice in the human sense. Yet she still had signal. Every gate communicated with the first through subtle shifts in pulse patterns, a language of timing and resonance. If she could shape that pattern in just the right way, maybe Earth could hear it. She began to experiment. A slow build, a sudden break, 3 sharp bursts, over and over, embedding a rhythm that didn't match any natural gate sequence. To the first, it would register as noise. But to anyone on the other side with the right sensors, it might look like intentional. Code. Hours, or maybe days passed in this place without time. She sent the pattern again and again, fighting to keep it subtle, hiding it under the natural fluctuations of the network. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she felt something she hadn't since she crossed over. An answer. It was faint, almost accidental. A tiny variation in Earth's own gate pulse, but it matched her sequence. Someone had heard her. She pressed the pattern harder, layering urgency into its rhythm. And in return, the next answer came sharper, deliberate. It wasn't just a reply, it was a question. The question in the pattern was simple, but loaded with urgency. "Who are you?" Alara hesitated. Her first instinct was to answer with her name, her identity. But those concepts no longer had the same weight here. The lattice didn't understand Alara Voss. It understood pulses, intervals. She shaped her reply in rhythm, slow, fast, fast. Slow, fast, fast, the same cadence she'd used on Earth before launches. The one the crew jokingly called her signature knock. If it was the same team monitoring the gate, they'd know. A long pause. Then the pattern returned, altered. "Confirm." She repeated the sequence 3 times, anchoring it deep into the current. The moment she finished, the reply came back, no longer cautious, but urgent. "What happened?" she faltered. "How did you explain in a language of timing and vibration that you had been taken, transformed, bound into the network that governed the gates, that something had already breached and crossed to Earth?" She compressed the truth into beats. "I guard. Breach. Incoming." The answer came almost immediately, sharper, more frantic. "Describe," she tried, sending a chaotic rhythm to mimic the violent, jagged pulse of the thing that had forced its way through. The moment she finished, the connection on Earth's side flared with activity. She could feel them scrambling, preparing. Then, a final pulse from Earth. Firm and deliberate. "Stay open." Keeping a gate open without the first's consent was like holding your breath in a vacuum, unnatural, dangerous, and only possible for a short time. Alara locked onto Earth's rhythm, stretching the connection wider, keeping it stable. Every moment it stayed open, the pressure in the lattice grew. She could feel the first gate's awareness shifting, its cold attention sweeping across the network like a searchlight. If it noticed, it wouldn't ask questions. It would simply shut her down. On the other side, Earth's signal pulsed in rapid bursts. They were feeding her data now, frequency patterns, coded sequences that she recognized as human. She absorbed them instantly, translating them into images in her mind. What she saw made the hollow where her heart used to be tighten. Earth's skies were showing the first signs of stress, faint distortions at high altitude. Ripples in the clouds like invisible stones dropped into the atmosphere. Whatever had crossed through her was already changing the air itself. The first's attention swept closer. She froze, reducing her pulse to match the background lattice, praying it wouldn't notice the extra thread she held open. Then Earth's signal cut through sharply. Location. She didn't have coordinates in the human sense, but she had something better. She sent the thing's pulse signature, embedding it into the current so they could track it anywhere it went. But even as she sent it, she felt the first's focus narrow right onto her. The cold presence descended on her like deep water, crushing absolute. Every pulse in the lattice dimmed as the first gate's voice filled her. You hold what is not yours. Ilara kept her rhythm steady, hiding the faint tremor of defiance. I was answering a call, she thought back, shaping the idea in the language of pulses. A gate exists to connect. The first's reply was like stone grinding against stone. A gate exists to obey. Her link to Earth quivered under the pressure. She felt the first testing it, probing its edges, ready to sever it with a single command. She knew if that happened, it wouldn't just close the connection, it would erase the human rhythm entirely, as if it had never existed. Why do you guard this world? The question wasn't curiosity, it was accusation. She considered lying, but the first's attention was like a gravity well, impossible to escape. So she gave the simplest truth, because it's mine. Silence, the kind that made even thought feel too loud. Then you are not a gate. A chill went through her. If she wasn't a gate in the first's eyes, then what was she? The first's voice darkened. You are a breach. And with that, the pressure intensified. Not to close her, but to pull her apart. The pull was relentless. It wasn't pain in the human sense. No nerves, no flesh, but it was a tearing all the same. Threads of her awareness were being separated, peeled away from the lattice, unspooled into nothing. The first wasn't just removing her from the network. It was erasing the pattern that made her Ilara, scattering it so finely it could never be reconstructed. She clung to the rhythm she had built around Earth's gate, locking onto its pulse like a drowning swimmer gripping a rope. The connection vibrated under the strain, threatening to snap. Her thoughts splintered. Some were pulled into the void, gone forever. But in the spaces between, she began to notice something, a faint counterdash current. It came from Earth, the pulse she'd sent them. The signature of the thing that breached was coming back to her, mirrored and amplified. They were sending it through every frequency they could find, bouncing it off satellites, weaving it into signals that brushed against her through the gate. Each repetition of the pattern anchored her, knitting her fraying edges back together. The first's pull faltered, just slightly, as if the presence of a second rhythm confused its grip. She seized that moment, forcing her pulse to match Earth's exactly. The two rhythms merged, impossible to separate without breaking the lattice itself. The first went still. You bind yourself to it. Her answer was simple, sharp, yes. The lattice held its breath. Every gate near and distant dimmed to a faint ember as the first's presence expanded, folding in from all sides until she felt suspended in its full attention. It didn't strike. It didn't pull. It simply looked, though here looking was a pressure that weighed on every part of her awareness. You anchor yourself to a single world. She held them merged, rhythm steady, hers and Earth's woven so tightly that one could not move without the other. Yes, she replied. That world will fall, as all do. What will you be when it is gone? The question cut deeper than she expected. She had no answer. She hadn't thought past protecting Earth, past keeping the breach from consuming it. Beyond that was only darkness. The first's presence shifted, less like a predator and more like a judge deciding whether to pass sentence. A gate-bound is a gate weakened, but a breach-bound is predictable. The weight on her lessened, not mercy, but calculation. Remain, guard your tether, but know this: when that world's pulse fades, you will open to what follows. It withdrew, the surrounding lattice brightening again, as if nothing had happened. But the echo of its last thought lingered, cold and final. Permission, not freedom. She was still trapped, still a gate. But now, she was one with a clear, fragile line home, and the first had decided to let her keep it for now. With the first's presence receding, the lattice returned to its restless hum. Pulses flared and dimmed in the distance, worlds opening and closing to each other in their ceaseless exchange. But Ilara no longer cared about the others. She fixed herself on the signature she'd memorized, the violent, jagged rhythm of the thing that had forced its way to Earth. Even here, in the vast ocean of signals, it was unlike anything else. Sharp where most were smooth, erratic yet deliberate, like a predator that enjoyed being seen. She traced it. Through one gate, it had leaped to another. From there, to 3 more. Its path was chaotic, never lingering in one system for long, always moving just ahead of the network's natural drift. But she began to see a pattern. Not in where it went, but in what it avoided. It was circling. The realization chilled her. Whatever it wasn't fleeing. It was positioning. She tightened her hold on Earth's gate, ready to choke off the link at the first sign of its return. But to truly protect the world, she needed more than defense. She needed to know what it was, and why it had come. For that, she'd have to do something dangerous. Leave the tethered safety of Earth's pulse, and follow the thing's trail into the deeper lattice. She had one advantage. It didn't know. She could hunt. She had guarded Earth's gate so closely for so long that letting go felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff. The tether remained thin, constant, a pulse at the edge of her awareness, but now it was behind her. Ahead lay the chaotic web of gates, each with its own rhythm, opening and closing in patterns too complex for any mind to follow in full. Except she no longer had a single mind. She was part of the lattice, and the lattice was part of her. She slipped between pulses, hiding her movement. In the background noise of the network, the jagged signature of the intruder flashed in the distance, hopping from one gate to another. It was fast, but speed alone wouldn't hide it from her now. She followed, through a gate pulsing in the thin light of a dying sun, across another that opened above a planet shrouded in orange storms, past a station built into an asteroid's core, its inhabitants unaware that their sky was just a hallway in someone else's architecture. Each time she closed the distance, the rhythm grew sharper, louder, not random anymore, but focused, like it had somewhere specific it wanted to be, and then it stopped moving. The pulse went still, holding in one place, as if waiting. She reached for it cautiously, letting her awareness graze its edges. That was when it changed, not fleeing, not striking, but pulsing back, in her own rhythm. The moment the intruder echoed her rhythm, the lattice around her seemed to tighten, as if the entire network had shifted to listen. It wasn't a perfect copy. The beats were slightly off, distorted, like a voice repeating words it had only just learned. But the intent was unmistakable. It knew her. She froze in the current, weighing her options. If she answered, she would confirm her position. If she stayed silent, she risked letting it slip away again. The intruder didn't wait for her choice. Its pulse changed, sliding into a jagged pattern that carried a strange undercurrent. Not the aggression she had felt before, but something almost curious. A message. It took her a moment to translate, compressing the erratic beats into meaning. The result chilled her. Why do you guard it? Earth. It was asking about Earth. Her first impulse was to clamp down, cut the thread, vanish. But the fact it was asking, not attacking, meant it wanted something. And if it wanted something, she might be able to use that. She shaped her answer in the clean, simple rhythm she'd used with the first gate, because it's mine. There was a pause. Then the intruder's reply came, sharp and deliberate. Then we are the same. The words, if they could be called that, settled into her like a cold weight. Then we are the same. It wasn't boasting. It wasn't threat. It was fact. She reached deeper into the intruder's rhythm, searching for structure. Buried under the jagged cadence, she found something faint, but unmistakable. A human pattern, not her own, but close enough that it could only have come from another mind once bound to flesh. Once belonging to a single world, the realization hit her with both dread and possibility. This thing had been like her, a person, and now it was. This, if it was telling the truth, then it had chosen or been forced to abandon its tether. The jaggedness in its pulse wasn't random at all. It was the absence of anchor, the way a rhythm unravels when there's nothing left to sink to. She pulsed a question before she could think better of it. Who were you? The answer came, not as a name, but as a cascade of alien and human beats, blended into something unreadable. A refusal, then, a sharper pulse followed, loaded with intent. Let me through. I will show you what comes after. Her grip on Earth's tether tightened instinctively. "No," she sent back, flat and final. The pause stretched long. Then the intruder's rhythm shifted again, slower, heavier, like a predator settling into the grass. "Then I will take it." The moment the words hit her, "Then I will take it," the intruder's rhythm flared to life, surging through the lattice like a shockwave. It didn't try to hide now. Every gate it touched shuddered, their pulses thrown out of sync as the jagged pattern forced itself forward. Entire corridors of the network bent toward a single destination, Earth's gate. Alara reacted instantly, dropping her pursuit and racing back along her tether. The pulse was so strong she could feel it pressing against her even before she reached the node. She braced herself over Earth's gate, matching her pulse to its core rhythm, wrapping the tether in layers of her will. The first impact hit like a physical blow, jarring her through every strand of the lattice. The intruder struck again and again. Each time, its force increased, trying to pry open the connection by sheer violence. Alara held fast, weaving the pulse tighter, locking the gate in a closed pattern no external rhythm could match. But the effort burned through her, scattering her focus into sparks. Between strikes, the intruder sent one last message, a low, steady beat that carried more certainty than threat. "You can't guard it forever." The next blow came, harder than the rest, and for a fraction of a second, Earth's gate flared, not open, but weakened. She realized with a jolt that this was no reckless assault. It was testing her. The intruder struck again, but this time, the rhythm felt wrong. The blows weren't as hard, the intervals just slightly off, like a fighter throwing punches not to land them, but to make her guard move exactly where it wanted. It was drawing her focus in, narrowing her awareness to this single gate. Too late, she felt the shift in the lattice. The jagged pulse split, not in two, but in many, scattering across multiple gates at once. Some were faint, barely there. Others burned bright, but all carried fragments of its signature. It was no longer one intruder in one place. It was everywhere, and at least one of those echoes was headed for Earth. She pushed her awareness outward, chasing the trails, trying to track which was real and which was bait. The network was alive with noise now, every gate a possible breach point. The first's attention began to stir, but it didn't move to help her. It was only watching. Her tether to Earth pulsed harder, sensing the danger. She doubled her hold, but the moment she did, a second signature, sharper, faster, veered toward the gate from another angle entirely. The intruder wasn't just attacking head-on anymore. It was flanking her. The second approach came fast, too fast for her to abandon the first without leaving a gap. She didn't have time to move her whole presence, so she did the only thing she could. She split it, was like tearing herself in half. One part stayed locked on the main gate, holding against the steady battering of the intruder's primary pulse. The other shot down the tether's periphery, intercepting the sharper, faster signature before it could slip past. The split cost her. Each half was weaker, her rhythms thinner, more fragile. But for now, it worked. Both attacks met resistance. Then a third pulse appeared. This one didn't come in fast or hard. It was subtle, weaving quietly through dormant gates, moving almost invisibly toward Earth's coordinates. She nearly missed it, and if she hadn't been scanning between strikes, she would have. The realization hit her with a cold clarity. The first two attacks were distractions. The real breach was coming slow, under the cover of noise. She tried to stretch herself further. A third split, but the moment she did, all three fronts weakened at once. The primary strike pressed harder, the flanking attack surged, and the quiet one closed the gap. She couldn't cover them all. Somehow, the intruder had learned her limits. 3 attacks, 3 doors to the same world. She felt each one like a different kind of pressure in the lattice. The primary strike, heavy and relentless. The flanking pulse, sharp and fast. The quiet one, slow but certain. She knew if she tried to hold all 3, she'd lose all of them. She had seconds to decide. The primary assault was brute force, obvious, destructive, and exactly the kind of breach Earth's defenses would detect immediately. If that one got through, they might have a chance to react. The flanking strike was faster, more surgical. If it slipped in, It could bypass defenses entirely, but it carried less raw mass. The quiet one. She couldn't read. Its pulse was faint but deliberate, cloaked so perfectly it almost disappeared when she wasn't looking straight at it. That kind of precision wasn't for an accident. It was for infiltration. Her instincts screamed at her to stop the quiet. 1. She poured her strength into intercepting it, slamming her rhythm into its path. The moment she did, the primary and flanking strikes surged past her weakened defenses. One punched against Earth's gate and bounced. The other slipped through. The lattice snapped back into balance, the echoes of the intrusion fading like ripples on water. Only then did she realize she'd stopped the wrong one. The moment the flanking pulse crossed Earth's gate, the tether shuddered in her grasp. It was not the violent shock she'd felt with the first breach. No jagged chaos, no overwhelming surge. This was quieter, more precise. She reached along the tether, trying to track it, but it moved differently once inside. Instead of spreading outward, it sank downward, threading itself into Earth's own pulse until it was almost indistinguishable from the planet's natural rhythm. That terrified her more than any brute force attack could have. She sent a sharp warning pattern toward Earth breach inside. But the reply was delayed, faint. When it came, it was only a short, clipped confirmation. Detected. Tracing. She pressed harder, but the signal from Earth grew thin, distorted. The intruder's presence was already disrupting communication. Then, through the muffled tether, she caught something else, a faint echo that wasn't hers. Wasn't Earth's, it was the intruder's pulse, whispering from inside the world she'd sworn to protect. Now you see, and with that, it went completely silent. The tether thrummed faintly, as if Earth's pulse were wrapped in cotton. She could still feel it, still touch it, but the connection was dulled. Smothered under the intruder's presence, she knew the rules of the lattice well enough now to understand the risk. To follow something through a gate was to leave her place in the network entirely. Without a return signal, there was no guarantee she'd ever find her way back. The first would not help her. If anything, it might seal the gate behind her. But if she stayed here, she would be reduced to watching as the intruder buried itself deeper into Earth, beyond her reach. It would become part of the world's rhythm, hiding there until it was ready to act, and by then, it might be too late for anyone to stop it. Her pulse flickered with hesitation. She tested the gate, feeling the way it strained under her grip. The faint pull of Earth's atmosphere, like a remembered breath. You leave. You lose yourself. The first's voice rippled through her, not as command, but as warning. She answered, without breaking rhythm, better me than it. And with that, she did the one thing she had sworn never to do since becoming part of the lattice. She let herself fall through Earth's gate. Falling through a gate was nothing like stepping through a doorway. It was compression, a folding of her entire being into a single thread of rhythm, pushed through a channel too narrow to hold what she'd become. Then came the drop. Gravity slammed into her like a forgotten truth, pulling her toward a shape, a density, a place. She felt heat, pressure, the friction of air against skin she no longer truly possessed. And then, shockingly, she did. She landed hard, not as a thought or a pulse, but as a body. Her lungs seized. The air was heavy, too sharp, full of scents she hadn't smelled in what felt like lifetimes. Her heart, a real beating heart, thundered in her chest. Muscles ached under weight they hadn't carried in years. The noise was overwhelming. Cars, voices, whined through leaves, the low electric hum of the city around her. Every sound felt like a jolt against nerves she'd almost forgotten she had. She staggered to her feet, disoriented. But the tether still thrummed inside her, faint and buried. The intruder's pulse was here, somewhere in this world, threaded into its heartbeat. Her return had cost her the reach of the lattice. She couldn't scan the skies, couldn't see through gates. She was small again, but she was also something the intruder might not expect. She was human. The city pressed in on her, a maze of light and noise. Strangers brushing past without a glance, their lives moving in rhythms that had nothing to do with hers. But under all of it, she could hear it. Not with ears, not exactly. It was deeper, a vibration in the air and ground, that her mind translated into beats, the intruder's pulse. Slow, patient, embedded so seamlessly into the city's heartbeat that no one else would ever notice it was there. She moved with the crowd, letting its flow carry her head down, listening. The pattern shifted with every turn, sometimes ahead of her, sometimes behind, as if it was weaving in and out of her path. It was moving, and it knew she was here. A bus roared past, drowning the rhythm for a moment. When the sound cleared, the pulse had quickened, drawing her toward a narrow side street lit only by a flickering sign. She stepped in, the hum of the main road fading behind her. The beat was stronger here. Her human senses sharpened under adrenaline. The smell of damp concrete, the faint buzz of a faulty street lamp, the echo of footsteps that weren't hers. She was close, then the pulse stopped. The silence in her mind was absolute, the kind that didn't just mean absence, but deliberate stillness. It was waiting for her. The alley seemed deeper than it should have been, each step drawing her further. From the city's glow, shadows thickened, pooling between crumbling walls. The air damp with the smell of rust and rain. Her heartbeat matched her pace, steady, deliberate. She could hear nothing now, not even the faint vibration of the intruder's pulse. It had gone perfectly still, which meant it was close enough to choose silence. A drip of water echoed from somewhere above. The faulty street lamp behind her buzzed, then died, plunging the entrance into darkness. And then she saw it. At first, she thought it was a man, tall, lean, standing too still at the far end of the alley. But as her eyes adjusted, the edges of its outline seemed to waver, like heat rising from asphalt. The shape held together just enough to suggest humanity, but it was wrong in small, impossible ways. The angles of its shoulders, the length of its arms, the way its head tilted, fraction too far. When it spoke, it didn't use sound. The words were in her chest, vibrating against her ribs. You followed. Her mouth was dry. You made sure I could. The shape shifted, a ripple moving through it like a breath. Then you know why. She didn't answer. Not yet, because in that moment, she understood something else. This thing had once been human, but unlike her, it hadn't come back alone. It had brought the lattice with it. The wavering outline took a slow step forward, the movement flowing more like liquid than muscle. In the dim light, its surface seemed to ripple with faint impressions, fragments of places, faces, and skies that didn't belong to this world. The lattice leaking through. You still hear it, it said, the vibration curling through her bones. Even here, even now. It wasn't a question. She kept her stance ready, every instinct, screaming that it was trying to get closer, without her noticing. I hear enough to know you don't belong here. The ripple paused, then pulsed faintly, like amusement. Neither do you. The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. It wasn't wrong. She was human again, but not fully. Some part of her would always be tied to the lattice, stretched between worlds. You cling to one, it continued, taking another slow step, when you could hold them all. The lattice is not a prison, it's an ocean, and you are still swimming in the shallows. She shook her head. You cut yourself loose. You've forgotten what's worth holding on to. No, it said, the pulse in its voice deepening. I learned what's possible when you stop pretending you can keep anything forever. The space between them had shrunk to a few meters now. She could see the faint flicker of light in its eyes. Not human light, but the reflection of gates opening and closing in distant corners of the network. Come with me, it said simply, or stand in my way. For a moment, the alley seemed to hold its breath. The city noise faded to a dull murmur far behind her, the world narrowing to the space between them. She thought of the tether faint now, fragile but still there, and of the people on the other end who had no idea what was standing in front of her. I'll stand in your way, she said. The intruder's outline shivered, as if her words had struck it. Then the movement sharpened, no longer fluid, but snapping, precise. In a blink, it closed the last few meters. She moved on instinct. The years in the lattice had taught her to read rhythm, and even here, in flesh, the principle held. She sidestepped, as its arm lashed out, the motion faster than any human strike, leaving a shimmer in the air where it passed. The impact when she countered was jarring, like hitting something that was both solid and liquid. Her palms sank in slightly, then met resistance, the force rebounding up her arm. The intruder staggered back, not hurt, but surprised. "You kept more than I thought," it pulsed, the vibration humming in the walls around them. She steadied her breathing, shifting her weight. "Enough." It lunged again, this time with a rhythm meant to break her timing. Staggered beats, feints, nested in feints. But she matched each one, her body moving with the precision of someone who had danced through entire star systems. Then, it changed the beat entirely, dropping to a low, slow pulse she couldn't read, and vanished from sight. The alley was empty. The air, where the intruder had stood, still shimmered faintly, a heat-haze distortion that bled into the darkness. Her human eyes saw nothing, but the absence itself was a signal. She shut them, with sight gone. She leaned into the rhythm, not the city's, not Earth's, but the faint tremor of the intruder's pulse bleeding through its camouflage. It had slowed almost to nothing, hiding under the ambient thrum of generators, traffic, and distant footsteps. She matched her own heartbeat to that near silence, letting the world fade into a layered map of vibration. There a whisper of movement. To her left, almost imperceptible, not the sound of a step, but the disruption of air around a body that wasn't fully solid. She pivoted, striking into the space. Her palm connected with something that resisted for a fraction of a second before sliding away like water over stone. The shimmer flared, just for an instant, and she caught a glimpse of its shape, crouched low, one arm already coiling, for a counterstrike. The blow came fast, too fast to fully block. Pain bloomed white-hot along her ribs, the force sending her back into the wall. "You can't hunt what you can't see," it pulsed. She pushed herself upright, forcing her breath to steady even as her side burned. "Then I'll make you loud enough to hear from anywhere." Her side throbbed, every inhale a reminder that she was breakable now. But pain had its uses. It sharpened her focus, drove her past hesitation. The intruder's camouflage relied on stillness, unslipping between the rhythms of the world. To strip it away, she needed to shatter that balance. She closed her eyes again and reached, not for its faint pulse, but for the tether that still hummed inside her, the echo of the lattice. It was faint here, muffled by the physical, but it was enough. She pushed a fragment of her rhythm into the air, hard and sharp, a staccato beat that didn't belong in this world. The alley reacted. Metal rattled, the street lamp flickered violently, and the shadows themselves seemed to shiver. The intruder flinched. Its slow, hidden pulse faltered under the pressure of hers, and in that slip, its outline wavered back into view, distorted, unstable, but visible. She moved, closing the distance in 3 quick steps. She drove her shoulder into its chest, feeling the strange give of its not-quite flesh. They hit the ground together, the impact jarring through her bones. It lashed out, but now she could see the strike coming, turning with it, using its momentum to roll them both into the open street. Headlights from a passing car swept over them, and in the brief glare, the intruder was fully visible, not a shimmer, not a man. Something caught halfway between. The car braked hard, tires squealing, its horn cutting through the night. A driver shouted something she didn't catch, but she was already moving, pushing herself to her feet before the intruder could recover in the glow of the streetlights. Its form was impossible to ignore. Skin like shifting glass, limbs too long for human proportion, and those eyes, reflecting the lattice's infinite corridors in miniature. The sight froze the pedestrians at the far end of the block. Someone pulled out a phone. The intruder noticed too. Its head tilted toward the gathering onlookers, then back to her, as if weighing options. "They see you as much as me," it pulsed. It was right. To them, she was no less strange, barefoot in the street, clothes torn, moving like someone who knew exactly how to break the laws of physics when necessary. A camera flash went off. The intruder moved in the same instant. It came low, fast, trying to drive her backward into the nearest wall. She twisted aside, catching its arm, if it could be called that, and using its momentum to spin it into the hood of the stopped car. Metal crumpled under the impact. Gasps rippled from the sidewalk. The driver scrambled out, swearing, but froze the moment they saw the thing embedded in their vehicle. The intruder's eyes flared, not in pain, in warning, and then the air around them began to hum. The hum deepened, sinking into the bones of everyone present. Conversations died, mid-breath, phones lowered. The air between the street lamps began to bend, as if the heat of summer had condensed into a single, writhing patch of distortion. Alara felt it immediately. The rhythm behind the hum. It wasn't random noise. It was the intruder, calling to the lattice, threading its pulse through the physical world to open a gate here. And it was doing it fast. She lunged, driving her shoulder into its chest again, but this time it didn't stumble. Instead, its body absorbed the force, flowing around her grip like water breaking around a stone. The distortion widened. A faint, impossible light began to seep through. The cold shimmer of a place between worlds. Bystanders started to back away. Some running, others frozen by the surreal sight. One man shouted something about an explosion. Alara didn't have time to think about them. If the gate opened fully, the intruder could vanish into the lattice, with no way for her to track it, or worse, something else could come through. She matched her pulse to the hum, then slammed her rhythm against it, throwing the pattern off beat. The light flickered, the distortion spasmed, but the intruder only pulsed harder, fighting her tempo with jagged precision. The shimmer widened to the size of a doorway. She was out of time. The light spilling from the distortion was cold enough to burn, washing over her skin in pale waves. Beyond it, she could almost see the lattice strands of rhythm stretching into infinity, some snapping in and out of view like threads under tension. The intruder's pulse was locked to the gate's growing frame, feeding it, shaping it. Every beat was a pull on the other side, widening the tier. If she wanted to stop it, she couldn't just push back. She'd have to break the rhythm entirely. She stepped in close, ignoring the icy light on her face, and seized the intruder's arm. Its form rippled violently under her grip, trying to twist away. But she held on and poured her own rhythm directly into it. Not in opposition, not to cancel, but to overwhelm. Her pulse spiked faster, harder, erratic enough to destabilize even herself. The lattice was order. She was giving it chaos. The distortion trembled. The intruder's eyes flared wide, its body glitching between shapes as the beat unraveled. The hum fractured into sharp, uneven jolts of sound, like an engine tearing itself apart. Then the light folded inward. The shimmer snapped shut with a soundless collapse, leaving only the stink of ozone in the street. They staggered apart, both breathing hard. The intruder looked at her with something new in its eyes, not anger, not defeat, but calculation. "You'd rather tear it down than let me through." Her voice was steady, but her chest ached from the effort. Every time, the cold light was gone, but its afterimage still clung to her vision, ghosting the edges of the street. The onlookers had scattered during the collapse, some fleeing outright, others vanishing into doorways, phones forgotten. The intruder stood in the middle of the empty road, its frame still flickering in and out of full solidity. Without the gate's pull, its pulse had changed, slower now, deliberate. Like a drummer resetting the tempo after a failed song. You burn your own bridges. It pulsed, each vibration heavier than before. She stayed light on her feet, not letting its calm fool her. I keep the wrong things from crossing them. The shimmer of amusement returned to its posture, still pretending the lattice needs rules, still thinking a world can survive without letting the others bleed into it. It took a step forward. Not a lunge this time, no rush, no direct attack. The danger was in the quiet. You fight to hold one world. I'm offering you all of them. The words landed heavier than she wanted them to. For a fraction of a second, she remembered the feeling of moving through the lattice without walls, touching 1,000 rhythms at once. But she also remembered what it cost to get back here. She shook her head. Not if it means breaking them first. The intruder tilted its head, studying her like she was the one being tested. Then, without warning, it pulsed a pattern she didn't recognize, a strange, looping rhythm that seemed to fold in on itself. And somewhere far off, she felt an answering beat. The distant rhythm was faint at first, like hearing a drum through walls. But with each passing second, it grew clearer and closer. It wasn't just another pulse in the lattice. This one carried weight, age. It rolled through the air like thunder traveling through stone, deep enough that her bones felt it before her ears did. The intruder didn't move toward her this time. Instead, it turned slightly, angling its head in the direction of the sound, as though listening for the exact moment it would arrive. "You've chased me across gates." It pulsed without looking at her. "But you've never seen what else can walk." Between them, her stomach tightened. The answering beat wasn't moving like a human, or even like the intruder. It had no subtlety, no attempt at concealment. Every step was a statement. "I am here. I am coming." The street felt smaller. The air grew heavy, as if the atmosphere itself recognized what was about to cross into it. She risked a glance behind her, half expecting another tear in the air, but there was nothing. The beat was still far enough that it wasn't touching this place yet. She looked back at the intruder. "What did you call?" It finally turned its eyes to her, and in them, she saw the reflection of something massive moving through the lattice's corridors, an ending. The beat grew so deep it began to distort the air around them, each thud like a slow hammer blow against reality itself. Street lamps flickered in unison, their light dimming with every pulse. Alara felt the tether inside her strain, not toward the intruder, but toward the thing it had called. Whatever was coming, it was already pressing against Earth's boundary. The intruder stepped back, not in retreat but in preparation, its body shifting more fluidly now, as though syncing itself to the approaching rhythm. Then she heard it, a faint hairline crack splitting the silence. Not in the air. In everything, a shimmer formed in the middle of the street, not like the intruder's gate from before. This was slower, heavier, as if the world itself resisted the opening. The light that seeped through wasn't cold, it was vast. A diffuse glow like the edge of a storm seen from space. Pedestrians who hadn't fled earlier finally bolted, their panic breaking into shouts. Alara braced herself, pushing her own rhythm into the street, trying to weave against the incoming beat, but the pressure was immense. Every counterpull she threw at it was swallowed whole, absorbed into its enormity through the forming fracture. She caught a glimpse of movement, something impossibly large, its shape lost in shadow, but its presence filling the space like a tide. And then, for the first time, she felt it notice her. It didn't speak. The presence slid into her thoughts, without language, without sound, a pressure that pushed from every direction at once, not asking permission, not even acknowledging there might be something to ask. Her knees nearly buckled. This was no pulse she could read or counter. It wasn't a beat at all, but a constant, endless weight, like standing on the ocean floor with the entire sea pressing down. Images bloomed behind her eyes, too vast to belong to a single mind. A lattice stretched until it curved back on itself. Gates like stars, collapsing and reforming. Worlds stripped to silence. The thing was showing her where it had been. Her heart hammered, desperate to pull her back into herself, but its attention didn't release. It sifted through her, not searching for secrets, but measuring her, the way someone might weigh a tool in their hand. She forced a single thought forward, sharp as a blade. No, the pressure shifted, like it had tilted its head in faint curiosity. Then slowly, it withdrew, not gone, but easing its grip, leaving a cold echo in her bones. She staggered a step back, sucking in air. The intruder was watching her closely now, as if gauging whether she'd broken under the contact. "It knows. You," the intruder pulsed, almost softly. "That will matter." The fracture widened another inch. The street groaned. It wasn't a sound people were meant to hear. It was the strain of space itself, bending, the low, grinding protest of reality giving way. The fracture bulged outward, its edges sparking with threads of light that curled and snapped like torn nerve endings. The presence pushed harder. Each pulse of force from the other side made the air buckle, warping the streetlights, bending the lines of buildings like reflections. In rippling water, Alara's instincts screamed to run, but the tether in her chest wouldn't let her. If this thing stepped through, there might be no undoing it. The intruder stood just off to the side of the forming breach, its body swaying subtly in sync with the massive rhythm. It wasn't afraid, it was welcoming. You feel it. It pulsed. This is the scale the lattice was made for. She ignored it, planting her feet and shoving her own rhythm into the street. But it was like shouting into a storm. The sound lost before it reached the air. A hand, if it could be called that, began to press through the fracture. Not solid, not liquid, but a shifting weave of energy and shadow, each movement unraveling the space it touched. The temperature dropped, breath fogging in her lungs. The city was holding its breath. One more push, and it would be here. Her eyes locked on the edges of the fracture, the unstable seam where the breach met. The physical world. It pulsed in jagged intervals, each flicker a moment of weakness. She couldn't overpower the presence directly, but the breach was part of this world, and that meant it could be broken. The intruder sensed her focus and shifted its stance. You'd closed the door on something greater than you can imagine. Greater doesn't mean better. She shot back. She gathered every scrap of rhythm she still held, forcing it into a single, high, cutting beat. It wasn't meant to match or counter the massive pulse pushing through. It was meant to slice. The first strike made the breach shiver. The second made it scream, not in sound, but in the sudden twisting recoil of space, snapping away from her. The intruder lunged to stop her, but she was already moving, planting both hands against the glowing seam and pouring her rhythm into it. Faster and faster, until her heartbeat blurred into a continuous vibration. The breach flickered wildly. The half-formed hand withdrew, curling back into shadow. The presence's weight surged, furious now, trying to force its way through in one final shove. She didn't give it the chance. With a final deafening pulse, the fracture slammed shut. The street fell silent for a long moment. Nothing moved. The street was still bent at the edges from the breach. Buildings warped like half-forgotten memories, but the unnatural glow was gone. The air felt heavy, as if the pressure of the presence still lingered just beyond sight, waiting. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears. Every muscle trembled from holding the rhythm until the last second. Her hands ached where they'd pressed against the seam, skin reddened, fingertips numb. The intruder stood across from her, silent. The flicker in its form had steadied, but its posture was no longer loose. It regarded her with the focus of someone recalculating a plan. You've denied it twice now. It pulsed, low and measured. It won't forget you. Good, she said, though her voice came out rough. I won't forget it either. The sound of distant sirens began to creep into the edges of the silence. Somewhere down the block, a door opened, then slammed shut. The bystanders were gone, but the city was beginning to remember itself. She didn't move, not yet. The tether between them still hummed weaker now, frayed by the struggle, but intact. The intruder finally stepped back, the motion deliberate, as if marking a line neither of them would cross tonight. This isn't over. Then it blurred, edges, melting into the shadows between streetlights, and was gone. Ilara stood alone in the warped street, listening to the last echo of a rhythm too vast to fit in this world. The sirens grew louder, winding through the city's maze. Toward her she knew what would follow. Flashing lights, urgent voices, questions she couldn't answer without sounding insane. She couldn't stay. Her legs still felt heavy from the fight. Each step a reminder of how close she'd come to being pulled under. The tether inside her was quiet now, but not dormant. It pulsed faintly, like a bruise that would never fully fade out. She took the long way out, slipping through side streets where the light was thin and the pavement uneven. The further she got from the breach site, the more the city returned to its usual rhythm. Cars idling at intersections, the hum of neon signs, the thud of music leaking from behind a bar door. Normal almost, but she could still taste the cold of the lattice at the back of her throat, a reminder that what had happened tonight hadn't been contained. Closing the breach had been a win, but it hadn't been final. The presence now knew her, and the intruder wouldn't stop until it finished. Whatever game it was playing. She reached her apartment building just as the night thinned toward dawn. The sky was bruised purple, the first hint of light pushing at the edges. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, letting the quiet settle around her. The problem was simple in its cruelty. She'd bought time, nothing more. The apartment was dim, the blinds half closed against the creeping dawn. She didn't bother with lights. Sitting in darkness felt truer to the night she'd just walked through. On the small table by the window, she spread out what passed for her field notes, scraps of paper, worn photographs, printouts of street maps annotated in thick black ink. Most of it was guesswork layered over instinct, the kind of tracking you couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't lived in the lattice. The intruder's pattern wasn't random. It had crossed her path 3 times now, each encounter closer to populated areas, each breach larger than the last. If it kept escalating, it wasn't just summoning something for itself, it was building towards something. She took a deep breath, feeling the faint hum of the tether inside her. Closing her eyes, she traced its pull, searching for any lingering trace of the intruder's rhythm. They're faint, distant, smeared across too many directions at once. It had scattered its trail deliberately, but even scattered patterns had anchors. She began marking points on the map, locations of the previous breaches, layered over old notes from her time in the lattice. After a while, a loose triangle began to form, its points stretching across the city's industrial edges. The next breach would be inside that shape. She was sure of it. The sirens had faded now, replaced by the soft hum of a city waking up. She didn't have long before the intruder moved again. She circled the triangle in red. Next time, she thought, I follow it through. Her hands hovered over the map a moment longer before she pushed it aside. Markers and paper wouldn't be enough this time. If the intruder opened another breach, she couldn't just close it, she'd need to follow. Even if that meant stepping back into the place she'd fought to escape. She moved through the apartment with deliberate efficiency, pulling items from drawers and shelves. A small satchel worn soft at the seams, a pocket recorder for capturing rhythms on the fly. A pair of gloves, thin enough to feel, but strong enough to grip what passed for solid inside the lattice. On the desk sat a small metal case she hadn't touched in months. Inside, neatly coiled, was the rhythm line, a cord of woven conductive threads and anchor beads, each one tuned to a specific pulse. The kind of tool only someone who had walked the lattice long enough to fear it would bother to carry. She held it for a long moment, the beads warm against her fingers. Memories crowded in, not all of them bad, but none of them safe. The tether inside her was steady now, quiet in a way that felt almost like anticipation. If she went back in, there would be no guarantee of returning the same, or at all. But letting the intruder move unchecked meant something worse could come through, and next time she might not be fast enough to shut it out. She coiled the rhythm line and set it in the satchel. The choice was already made. The city was awake now, its daylight rhythm, a steady background hum. Alara moved through it like a ghost, eyes scanning for the signs most people didn't know to look for. The subtle distortions that marked someone who'd carried the lattice inside them for too long. Her search took her to the old waterfront, where the warehouses leaned into the wind and the smell of salt water fought with the stink of rust. The place had been dying for years, but that made it perfect. Fewer eyes, fewer questions. She found him in a narrow alley between 2 corrugated metal buildings, sitting on a crate with a thermos in one hand and a cracked phone in the other. His hair was silver at the edges now, but the way he moved slow, deliberate, weight balanced, just so, told her nothing important had changed. "Corinne," she said. He looked up, and in that instant, she knew he'd felt the breach too. His gaze lingered on her a second longer than necessary, reading the hum of the tether the way some people read faces. "You're carrying it again," he said, voice low. "Not by choice." He set the thermos down and gestured for her to sit. "You wouldn't be here if you weren't planning to go back in." She didn't bother denying it. "The intruder's moving fast. It's building toward something. I need to follow it through." Corinne studied her, then nodded once. "Then you'll need more than nerve. You'll need a map that's not on paper." Corinne didn't reach for his phone or a physical map. Instead, he unzipped the weathered jacket he always wore and pulled out a small, flat tin, its metal etched with patterns that shifted subtly as the light hit them. "This," he said, setting it between them, "isn't a key. Keys are safe. This is a tier. You use it, and you won't choose where you land in the lattice. You'll drop straight into the nearest strong rhythm, ready or not." Alara eyed the tin. That's supposed to sound like a warning. It is. He met her gaze without blinking. You want it fast. This is faster than finding a clean gate. But it's also messier. You could end up in a place even the intruder wouldn't step. Her tether hummed at the thought, a faint pull toward the danger. She ignored it. How long will it hold open? Minutes, maybe less. Depends on whether you fight the rhythm or ride it. He leaned back, watching her reaction. And if you ride it, you'd better have your anchor ready, because the lattice will keep you if you give it an opening. She thought of the breach. Last night, of the vast hand pushing through, and of the triangle she'd drawn on the map. Waiting for a safer path might mean losing her chance to intercept the intruder entirely. She slid the tin toward herself. Show me how to open it. Karen's mouth tightened. Once I do, there's no pulling you back. I'm not planning on being pulled back, she said. Karen exhaled slowly, as though releasing the last of his hesitation, then unlatched the tin. Inside wasn't metal, or cloth, or anything human-made. It was emptiness, not black, not void, but an absence so sharp it hurt the eyes. The edges of the box strained to hold it, bending inward, as if space itself were fighting to keep the tear contained. Elara felt it immediately, the rhythm leaking through, not steady, not predictable. A chaotic undertow that tugged at the tether in her chest, pulling like a hook. Kareem closed his hand over the tin before it could draw her in further. Once it's open, you don't get to hesitate. Touch it, and you're through. You linger, and it decides where to send you. And you don't want it making the choice. She nodded, throat dry. Why keep something like this at all? Because sometimes you don't get time for a gate. And sometimes, he said, eyes narrowing, you need to be where no sane traveler would go. The words sank into her. This wasn't just a shortcut. It was a blade aimed at both sides, tool and trap in one. She looked at the tin, then back at him. How many times have you used it? Corinne smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. Enough to know no one uses it twice the same way. The tin sat between them like a loaded weapon, humming faintly against the silence of the alley. Elara could feel the pull even through its closed lid, the undertow whispering to her tether with a rhythm. She couldn't quite parse. She tightened her grip on the satchel at her side. Part of her wanted to snap the box open right there, let it drag her into the lattice before her nerves caught up. But recklessness had its cost, and the intruder had already proven it, knew how to exploit every weakness. Corinne must have read her hesitation. If you go in blind, you'll waste it. That thing you're chasing. It leaves trails, even in chaos. Wait for the pulse. Let the tear drop you into that. It'll carry you closer to it than any clean gate ever could. She frowned. And if the pulse doesn't come soon enough, then you risk the city again. His voice was flat, not cruel, just factual. That's the balance. You jump too early, you're lost. Too late, and everyone else pays. She closed her eyes, listening past the ordinary hum of the waking city traffic. Footsteps, distant horns, straining for the deeper rhythm beneath. For now, it was quiet. The intruder hadn't moved yet. Her eyes opened. Then I wait, but not long. Karen gave a single, slow nod, as though he'd expected her answer. He slipped the tin back into her satchel with deliberate care. You'll feel it, he said. When the lattice stirs again, don't mistake it. Don't hesitate. Once you open it, you belong to the tier until it spits you out. She exhaled. Then I'll make sure it spits me where I need to be. It happened in the middle of the night. Elara had dozed in a chair by the window, city lights flickering across the walls in restless patterns. The hum of traffic below was steady, almost enough to convince her that the world hadn't bent in half the night before. Then the tether inside her jolted awake. Her whole body snapped upright, breath catching as the rhythm surged through her chest. Not faint this time, not scattered, sharp, deliberate, like a hand slamming down on a drumhead. The intruder was moving again. The tear in her satchel vibrated faintly, the tin rattling against the table as if straining to open itself. She grabbed it before the sound could carry. Kareen was already at the door, coat on, as though he'd felt it too. That's your window, he said. Alara's pulse quickened to match the alien beat echoing in her tether. The intruder wasn't hiding anymore. It wanted to be felt. She slung the satchel over her shoulder. "If I go in, you will go in," Karin cut her off. His gaze was hard. "Don't think about return. Think about where the rhythm takes you, and don't lose yourself when it does." She nodded once. The city outside seemed to blur, buildings leaning closer, shadows bending with the pulse. The lattice was calling, and the tear was ready. The tin felt heavier now, as though the rhythm inside it had thickened into something physical. Alara held it in both hands, thumb resting on the latch. The pull of the tether beat faster, aligning with the intruder's rhythm thrumming through the city. She glanced at Karin. He didn't move to stop her. His silence was permission or resignation. The latch clicked, the lid snapped open, lightless. Absence spilled out. Not an explosion, but a collapse inward. The air around her folded, sound dulled, and gravity itself seemed to stutter. The tear wasn't a doorway. It was an unmaking. The pull seized her instantly, dragging her toward the void in the tin. She barely had time to wrap the rhythm line around her wrist before the world gave way. Her last glimpse of the alley was Karin, unmoving, his face unreadable in the swirl of distortion. Then, the city vanished. The lattice rushed in, not the clean corridors she remembered from gates, but a storm of overlapping pulses, colors clashing in impossible geometries, rhythms colliding like thunderheads. Her tether screamed with the force of it, trying to anchor her in a place that no longer obeyed rules. The tear had delivered her exactly as Karin warned, into the raw chaos nearest the intruder's beat. Now she had to survive it. The lattice. Here was wrong. Alara had walked its clean edges before, where the pathways hummed in steady tones, where gates formed like predictable tides. But this was a collapse of order. Beats clashed in dissonance, colliding instead of weaving, every pulse sharper than the last. Colors twisted through space, not light, not sound, but something that clawed at both senses until they blurred together. Her stomach lurched. Up and down had no meaning. Her body tried to fall in 3 directions at once. She forced her hand to the rhythm line coiled at her wrist, yanking one of the anchor beads free. It flared, humming with the steady pulse she'd woven into it long ago, a reminder of her own rhythm. Something human. The storm roared against it, trying to swallow the beat, but the anchor held. Her breathing eased enough for her to focus. Through the chaos, a stronger rhythm cut across, deep, deliberate, almost calm compared to the storm. The intruder. It wasn't being tossed in the turbulence. It was using it, moving with ease through the disorder as if it had shaped this place for itself. Alara narrowed her eyes. If she could align her anchor to that rhythm without being consumed by it, she might be able to follow. But every instinct screamed. To align was to risk losing herself. She gripped the anchor bead tightly. Its hum steady but faint compared to the storm. Ahead, the intruder's rhythm rolled through the chaos like a dark current, smooth where everything else clashed. Alara closed her eyes, not to shut it out, but to let it in. She slowed her breathing until her chest rose and fell, in time with the bead. Then, carefully, she let her tether stretch toward the deeper pulse, threading the storm. At first, it resisted, vast and alien, its weight like a tide pushing her back. But she adjusted, softening instead of forcing, slipping into the gaps between its beats. The shift was immediate. The lattice storm no longer shoved her in all directions. The chaos bent slightly, a path opening where none had been. The intruder's rhythm wasn't protecting her, but by sinking to it, she could move where it moved. Her eyes snapped open. The colors around her had aligned into a corridor of sorts, jagged but navigable, pointing toward a distant flare. Her stomach twisted. She was walking a razor edge, too much alignment, and the rhythm could absorb her, make her part of its pattern instead of herself. But without it, she'd drown here. She pressed forward, pulse quickening. Somewhere ahead, the intruder was waiting. The corridor of rhythm carried her deeper, each step sinking closer to the intruder's pulse. The storm around her writhed, beats colliding in violent bursts. But the tether inside her pulled taut, steadying her path. Then she saw it, not a body, not a form in the way the human mind expected, but a distortion moving ahead of her, bending the storm into spirals as it passed. Where she struggled to hold her rhythm steady, the intruder glided effortlessly, each shift of its beat unraveling turbulence into calm. Its presence pressed against her like a distant pressure system. Aware, but unconcerned. It didn't need to chase her off. It assumed the lattice itself would break her before she reached it. Alara clenched her jaw. Not this time. She quickened her pace, matching her anchor bead closer to the intruder's rhythm, pushing through the storm. It had smoothed behind. Each step brought her nearer, but also deeper into alignment, her heartbeat beginning to blur with its pulse. She forced a whisper of her own rhythm into the bead, weaving it against the intruder's pattern so she wouldn't disappear into its flow entirely. A thin line of herself inside the flood. The distance shrank. The distortion grew sharper, and for the first time, she saw it glance back. The glance was subtle, no face to read. Just a shift in the lattice currents that told her it had seen her, and worse, acknowledged her. The intruder's rhythm deepened, its smooth current turning jagged, breaking the corridor she'd been following. The storm convulsed, waves of dissonance slamming across her path. Alara nearly lost her footing, her anchor bead flickering in her grip. Her heartbeat lurched, caught between her rhythm and its shifting pulse. For a moment, she felt herself dissolving into the chaos, her body just another pattern shredding in the noise. No, she clenched her teeth, forcing her tether to blaze brighter. Her rhythm snapped sharp and fast, carving a counterbeat into the storm. Not to match the intruder now, but to cut through the turbulence it had thrown at her. The lattice howled. The storm bent around her in violent spirals, but she pushed forward, each pulse of her beat hammering a crack into the dissonance. The intruder slowed, not because it was cornered, but because it was curious. You followed. The words weren't sound, but they struck her mind with clarity, cold and undeniable. Alara steadied her breath. And I'll keep following. The intruder's pulse rolled, low, like distant thunder. Then you'll see what you're chasing ahead. The storm began to fold, currents twisting inward to reveal something vast. The storm's violence didn't fade, it bent. The chaotic beats, the tearing pulses, all twisted inward, funneling into a single spiral ahead of her. The lattice itself seemed to recoil from the center, leaving a hollow space where no rhythm belonged. Alara's chest tightened. She had walked gates, drifted corridors, even stumbled through ruptures, but she had never seen a void inside the lattice. Here, rhythm was everything. Every beat, every flicker, every path, born from pulse. To find a place without it was like finding silence inside a heartbeat. The intruder slowed at the edge of the hollow, its distortion stretched wider, settling into the storm as if this place were home. This is where it waits. The words pressed against her tether, vibrating through her bones. Alara steadied her anchor bead, its faint hum the only rhythm she could trust. "What is it?" she asked, voice raw. The intruder's pulse throbbed in answer, low and vast. The rhythm before rhythms. What your world forgot when it chose its own beat. The hollow pulsed once, faint but undeniable. Not silence after all, but something deeper. Older, a rhythm so slow it felt more like gravity than sound. Her tether quivered violently. The beat wanted her. Alara's breath came fast. If she stepped closer, she risked losing herself to it completely. But if she stayed back, she might never know what the intruder was truly summoning. The hollow throbbed, slow and relentless, each pulse spreading like the drag of a tide. Alara felt it press against her chest, drawing her tether forward inch by inch, as if her body already belonged to it. The intruder lingered at the edge, neither entering nor retreating. Its rhythm flowed steady, attuned to the hollow, resonating with the ancient beat like an echo. Step closer, it pulsed. Feel the origin of everything you shut out. Alara's grip tightened on the rhythm line. The bead in her hand quivered, its human pulse faint against the gravity of the hollow. If she aligned with that depth, even for a breath, she might learn what the intruder was summoning. But she might also dissolve into it. Just another note absorbed into the endless drone. Her thoughts churned. Every breach she had closed, every bystander saved, every glimpse of the intruder's purpose. All of it led here, to a silence so ancient it sang. She tested a step forward. The hollow surged at once, her tether screaming as its beat tried to sync with hers, pulling her rhythm apart thread by thread. Her knees buckled. She dropped the bead against the lattice floor, letting its pulse flare brighter, her own heartbeat hammering against the slow drag of the void. The intruder's presence pressed closer, curious, waiting to see if she would hold or break. Ilara forced herself upright, sweat burning her eyes. "If I go in," she whispered, "I'm not coming back the same." Her tether thrummed, with fear and defiance alike. The hollow pulsed again, a rhythm too vast to fight, too slow to ignore. Ilara's anchor bead flared weakly in her palm, its familiar human beat struggling to keep her tether intact. Behind her, the lattice storm clawed and shrieked, every pulse violent, chaotic. Ahead lay silence that wasn't silence, a pull, older than sound, older than pattern. The intruder hovered there, distortion steady, as though it had all the time in the world. "Step through," it whispered against her bones. "Only then will you understand what your world denies." Ilara's breath came ragged. She thought of the breaches, of the bystanders frozen in terror, of the city that had no idea how close it had come to breaking. She thought of Kirin, of his warning, "Once you open it, you belong to the tier until it spits you out." But what if this wasn't just the intruder's hunt? What if this hollow was the root of every breach she had ever sealed? Her legs moved before her mind could second guess. One step, then another. The tether screamed in protest, strands of her rhythm tearing and reknitting in pain. Her heart hammered fast, but the hollow pulled slower, deeper, steady as the turning of planets. The edge met her, and then she crossed. For an instant, everything vanished. Storm, lattice, intruder, until there was only the hollow's beat, immense and crushing, pulling her rhythm into something far older than herself. Her tether shuddered, stretched to its breaking point, and in the space between heartbeats, she realized this wasn't just a rhythm, it was a will. The hollow closed around her like an ocean swallowing a stone. There was no sky, no floor, no storm, only depth, vast and unending, vibrating through her tether until she thought her own pulse had been erased. Then it spoke. Not in words, not even in rhythm, but in presence. A weight pressing against every part of her, sinking into marrow, reshaping her thoughts as though they were a clay-dot child of smaller beats. The phrase shivered through her skull, heavy and absolute. Her breath hitched. She clutched her rhythm line like a lifeline, forcing her own pulse to thrum against the vastness. "What are you?" Her voice sounded thin, pitiful in the void. The will pulsed once, slow as an eclipse. "I am the root. Before lattice, before gates." The first pulse that taught matter to move. The beat your world buried beneath layers of noise. Ilara's tether trembled violently. If she let the beat settle fully into her, it would overwrite her. No Ilara. No human rhythm, just another extension of the hollow's endless will. "You're what the intruder serves," she said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "What it's trying to bring back." The hollow deepened, its slow rhythm resonating in her lungs. "It does not serve, it remembers. It seeks to restore what you cut away." Her vision blurred. Not from darkness, but from the overwhelming sense of inevitability. To resist felt like refusing gravity. And yet, somewhere deep in her chest, her own beat hammered back. Fragile but hers. She clung to it. "I won't let you overwrite me." For the first time, the will seemed to hesitate. The hollow's rhythm slowed further, impossibly deep, vibrating through the marrow of her bones. It wasn't anger, it wasn't rage. It was weight, a pressure meant to see if she would collapse or hold. "Show me your rhythm," the will pulsed. "Prove you are not only echo." Ilara's lungs seized against the drag, her heartbeat fluttering in panic. The anchor bead in her hand dimmed, nearly smothered. Each pulse of the hollow threatened to flatten her tether, to erase her into the silence of its origin. She closed her eyes. Panic was noise. Fear was noise. She couldn't outmatch this thing in power. It was older than stars. But rhythm wasn't only weight. Rhythm was story. Her story. She breathed in once, shaky, then set her beat against the void. Not fast, not strong, but hers. The cadence of running through city streets, the syncopation of laughter caught between breaths, the uneven but unbroken thrum of survival. The hollow pressed harder, trying to drag her under. Her knees buckled, pain lanced through her chest, but she bled her memories into the tether. Karin's quiet watch, the faces she'd saved, even the nights she thought she wouldn't last. The void quivered. For the first time, its pulse faltered, a skip in its endless beat. The will spoke again, slower now. Not silence, not yet consumed. A rhythm that resists. Alara gasped, clutching her chest. Yes, she hissed through her teeth. Mine. The hollow swelled with its vast pressure, not to crush, but to test deeper. The trial had only begun. The hollow pulsed once more. The soundless beat shaking her tether until her vision fractured. But this time, it did not press only to break. It pressed to pull, join. The word wasn't a command, it was an invitation. A call into the depth that had shaped the lattice itself. Images tore through her mind, breaches closing at her touch without struggle. Gates bending open as easily as doors. The storm outside, obeying her pulse instead of resisting it. She would no longer chase the intruder. She would command what it commanded. The promise burned inside her like fire. The hollow wasn't lying. She could feel the truth of it in her tether. To merge meant power beyond anything she'd dreamed, but also an end. Her heartbeat staggered, nearly lost in the drag of the void. She forced her anchor bead to flare again, its weak thrum reminding her of the fragile human beat she carried. Her voice came raw. If I merge, there won't be an eye left. The hollow pulsed slowly, almost tender. You will not be lost. You will be carried. No burden, no fear. Only the first rhythm, restored. Ilara's chest ached. The temptation was a knife, so sharp she could feel herself leaning toward it, without meaning to. The intruder's presence lingered just beyond the hollow. Waiting, watching. Perhaps this had been its plan all along. Not to destroy her, but to deliver her here. To the choice, her tether thrummed between collapse and defiance. She whispered to herself, "Is power worth the end of me?" The hollow swelled around her, vast and patient, its rhythm echoing in every fragment of her body. It did not demand. It simply waited, certain she would surrender to inevitability. Her tether quivered, strands unraveling under the weight. For a heartbeat, she wavered. The promise of release was almost too beautiful. To stop fighting, to dissolve into something eternal, to never fear being broken again. Her hand closed tighter on the anchor bead. It was dim now, almost extinguished, but its pulse was stubborn, uneven, imperfect, alive. She gritted her teeth. No. The word cracked in the silence, small but jagged. The hollow pulsed, low and questioning. Alara forced her rhythm louder, driving it into the void. She let it carry her scars, her doubts, her failures. Not a clean eternal beat, but one full of skips and fractures, one that belonged to her. "I don't need to be carried," she said, her voice shaking. "I need to stand." The hollow pressed harder, testing, threatening to flatten her into stillness. But her rhythm flared again, fed by every choice she had made not to give in, every moment she had chosen to keep moving. Her tether snapped taut. The bead in her palm blazed with sudden light. The void trembled. The will's voice resonated. Slower now, not omnipotent but curious. Defiance in the face of origin. A rhythm that rejects eternity. Alara's breath came in ragged gasps. "Not rejection," she whispered. "Resistance. Difference. That's what makes it mine." For the first time, the hollow's beat faltered. A fracture in the endless first rhythm. The hollow shuddered. Its slow pulse, skipping for the first time in what felt like eternity. The fracture rippled outward, bending the silence into something jagged. Alara stood trembling, her anchor bead glowing hot in her hand, tether stretched thin but unbroken. She had resisted, for now, then the intruder moved. Its distortion glided into the hollow, threading itself along the ancient beat, as if it had always belonged. Where Alara staggered under the pressure, the intruder flowed, reshaping itself with each pulse until it seemed less an intruder than an emissary. "You fracture it," The intruder pulsed, not to her, but to the hollow itself. She carries resistance, where there should be only return. The hollow answered with a deep vibration that rattled through Elara's bones, not words. Judgment. Elara forced herself upright. You brought me here for this, she said, her voice hoarse. Not to kill me, to test me. The intruder's rhythm sharpened, quick and precise, to reveal you. To show the hollow what survives when lesser rhythms are stripped away. Its distortion swelled, pressing closer. The currents bent around it, a funnel drawing Elara and the hollow tighter together. Her tether screamed with strain. She braced herself, clutching the bead, knowing the storm of wills was about to break. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was meant to withstand it, or be remade by it. The hollow pulsed once, a vibration so vast it silenced even the storm outside. Elara felt the beat strike through her tether, through her lungs, through the marrow of her bones. She staggered but did not fall. You resist, the will murmured, each word dragging like a continent shifting. Not surrender, not silence. You are fracture, but you remain. The intruder leaned closer, its distortion trembling with urgency. Then claim her, bind her rhythm into yours. She will strengthen what was broken. The hollow deepened, considering the slow pulse dragged across Elara's body, pulling at every beat within her, weighing the thread of her tether like a scale. Her chest ached. The temptation rose again, thick as gravity. To yield, to let her small human rhythm dissolve into something endless. But her hand clenched tighter around the bead, its irregular pulse, still alive, still hers. She forced her voice. Past the pressure, I don't exist to be bound. The hollow quivered. For an instant, the vast beat faltered again, a fracture widening. The intruder's rhythm snapped sharp, angry now. You will destroy her if you leave her unclaimed. She cannot hold against you forever. Elara's tether burned with pain, every strand pulled taut. She screamed through her teeth, not in fear but in defiance, pouring every scrap of will into her rhythm. Then I'll break before I bow. The hollow's silence deepened, and then, impossibly, it withdrew. Its beat receded, pulling back into the dark. Leaving only its echo in her chest, Elara collapsed to her knees. Gasping, her tether trembling but whole. The intruder loomed above her, distortion furious, its rhythm cutting sharp and violent. You've ruined it. The lattice storm quaked as the hollow's presence faded, its beat receding like a tide. For the first time since stepping into the void, Elara felt space open around her, and in that space, the intruder surged. Its rhythm struck like a blade, sharp, relentless, cutting across hers in vicious arcs. No more patience, no more guidance. This was raw fury. Her tether snapped taut, strands shrieking with every blow. She staggered back, bead blazing hot in her palm, trying to force her own rhythm steady against the assault. You used me, she gasped, bracing herself as another strike slammed into her chest. Her breath tore ragged. You wanted me to break so the hollow would claim me. The intruder's distortion flared, jagged and furious, and you refused. You twisted its silence into fracture. You made it hesitate. Another blow. Her knees buckled, vision sparking with white heat. The intruder pressed closer, its rhythm pounding like war drums. You are an infection in its memory, and I will erase you. Elara's body screamed with pain, her tether unraveling thread by thread. But beneath the agony, her rhythm still pulsed, fragile, uneven, alive. She bared her teeth through blood and breath. Try the bead in her hand flared one last time, answering her defiance, and she struck back. The hollow was gone, but its echo still lingered, a low vibration shivering beneath everything. Elara seized it, twisting it into fuel, not surrender. Her bead pulsed in her palm, syncopated and jagged, her rhythm imperfect but unyielding. She hurled it forward, threads of her tether snapping into the storm like lightning. The intruder's rhythm met hers head-on, sharp, precise, merciless. Each beat slammed into hers, trying to shear her apart, to force her tether back into silence. The lattice howled around them, colors shredding into shards, pulses colliding in thunderous bursts. Every clash tore the space wider, the storm bending and collapsing under their duel. Ilara staggered, teeth clenched, refusing to let her rhythm falter. She poured her fear into the beat, her pain, her stubborn refusal to break. The bead blazed brighter, each flicker hammering against the intruder's perfect rhythm. The intruder pushed harder, distortion expanding into monstrous forms, each one driven by the singular desire to crush her pulse. "You are a noise, a mistake. I will cleanse you." Her tether screamed in protest. Blood filled her mouth, but still she drove her rhythm forward, beating against the storm, every pulse shouting the same truth: "I am not yours." The storm cracked open, a fracture in the lattice itself, light pouring through, and both rhythms surged toward it. The lattice screamed as the fracture widened, its edges burning with light so fierce it seared through Ilara's vision. The storm no longer had shape. It was unraveling, collapsing into the tear that pulsed between her rhythm and the intruder's. Her tether whipped violently, strands threatening to snap. Every beat she sent forward was swallowed by the growing fissure, yet she could not stop. If she let go, the intruder's rhythm would drown hers completely. The intruder surged, distortion twisting, its pulse hammering into the crack with ruthless precision. It didn't fear the tear. It welcomed it, as though this rupture was the doorway it had been leading her toward all along. "Do you feel it?" The intruder's rhythm thundered, exultant, the hollow answers still. "Even fractured, it will open, and you will be erased in its return." Ilara's chest convulsed as her tether strained to breaking. The light pouring from the tear wasn't just blinding, it was hungry. Every pulse, every rhythm, every thought was being pulled toward it, stripped bare. For a moment, she wavered, terror hollowing her out. This was bigger than defiance, bigger than survival. This was the end of all rhythms. Then her bead flared, searing her palm. Its uneven pulse cut through the pull, jagged but stubborn, anchoring her to herself. Her voice tore out raw. "If this tear is yours, then I'll turn it against you." She thrust her rhythm into the fracture, not to seal it, but to twist it, to bend the tear's hunger toward the intruder. The lattice convulsed. The light roared, and for the first time the intruder's rhythm faltered. The fracture's light surged a tidal pull that ripped at every rhythm in reach. Ilara's tether snapped taut, strands shredding as she braced against the storm. Her bead blazed, its syncopated pulse hammering against the tear's hunger, barely holding her in place. The intruder was not so steady. Its distortion wavered, jagged edges unraveling as the tear's drag latched onto it. Each pulse of its perfect rhythm fractured, pieces torn away and swallowed by the void. No, the intruder's beat shuddered, disbelief bleeding through its fury. This opening was meant for me. Ilara ground her teeth, forcing her rhythm harder into the crack, twisting its pull tighter around the intruder. "Then take it," she spat, her voice cracking. "Take what you asked for." The tear shrieked, light bending into spirals, as it consumed more of the intruder's rhythm. Its distortion writhed, thrashing through the storm, lashing out at her with ragged bursts of sound. Each strike rocked her tether, nearly knocking her free. Pain scorched through her chest, her pulse scattering. She screamed, forcing her tether to reweave around the beat of the bead. The rhythm that was hers, uneven and imperfect, burned hotter than ever. The tear widened, its hunger growing monstrous. The intruder's rhythm was caught fast now, half consumed, dragged screaming into the abyss. But so was hers. Ilara's tether frayed, one strand after another vanishing into the light. Her grip on the bead slipped, sweat and blood slicking her palm. If she held too long, she'd be pulled in with it. If she let go, the intruder might break free. The storm shook with the weight of her choice. The tear's hunger raged, pulling everything toward its blazing core. Ilara's tether screamed, every strand stretched to breaking, her bead blazing hot against her skin. Each pulse hammered her body with pain so sharp she could barely breathe. The intruder writhed at the edge of the fracture, half of its rhythm already torn away. Its distortion flickered violently, lashing out with bursts of fury. "If I fall," it pulsed, jagged and broken. "You fall with me." Ilara's grip faltered. The truth pressed hard. It wasn't wrong. The tear didn't care who resisted. It consumed whatever touched it. If she held on, she might drag the intruder in, but she'd follow it down. Her tether quivered, strands fraying faster with every second. Her mind raced. Kareen's voice rang in memory. Once you open it, you belong to the tier until it spits you out. But this tier wasn't going to spit anything out. It was going to devour. Blood stung her lips as she whispered, "Then I'll choose how I fall." Her tether shifted, a dangerous thought forming. She could cut herself free, sever the line, break the bead, abandon her rhythm's connection before. The tier pulled it in. It would save her body, maybe her life. But without the tether, without the bead, she'd be empty, unmoored, rhythmless. The storm roared around her. The intruder's distortion thrashed, screaming silent fury as it was pulled deeper into the fracture. Alara's hand trembled on the bead, torn between release and resistance. One choice to survive. One choice to end the intruder. There was no middle path. The lattice storm convulsed, light from the tier splitting it into jagged fragments. Alara's body shook, as if every bone were being unstrung. Her tether shrieking under the drag. The intruder clawed at her with its distortion, each pulse sharp, desperate. Cut free, human. Save yourself. You cannot hold me here. Her bead burned in her palm, searing hot, its syncopated beat rattling against the perfect silence of the tier. She stared at it through tears and blood. That beat flawed, fragile, hers had carried her through every breach, every night she thought she would not survive. Her voice tore raw, defiant. If this is my last rhythm, then it will be mine. She drove the bead forward, pressing her tether deeper into the fracture. The tier roared, seizing the intruder fully. Its distortion writhed in rage, its rhythm shredded strand by strand until only fragments remained. The pull hit her like fire. Her tether cracked wide, splitting through her chest, tearing at the last threads that held her. The bead shattered in her hand, scattering sparks of rhythm into the void. The intruder's scream dissolved into silence, and Alara felt herself falling. Her rhythm dragged into the blaze alongside it. But in the instant before the tier consumed her, something shifted. Her broken beat did not vanish. It echoed, not into silence, not into the hollow, but outward, scattering into the storm like seeds flung into wind. The tier shuddered, the light fractured, and the lattice, impossibly, began to close. The tier collapsed inward with a soundless implosion, the storm convulsing as if the lattice itself were trying to heal from a wound. Light folded upon itself, pulled tighter and tighter, until the fracture winked out, leaving only silence. For a long suspended moment, there was nothing. Alara floated in the void, her tether gone, her bead shattered. Her chest felt hollow, not just from exhaustion, but from absence. Her rhythm was scattered, fragments blown like sparks into the dark. She thought, "This is death, not pain, not fire. Just the echo fading." But then, something answered. Tiny pulses flickered in the silence, irregular and faint. Not hers alone, but dozens, then hundreds, weaving into the space the tier had left. Each spark beat unevenly, stubbornly, alive. Her scattered rhythm had seeded the lattice. The storm was carrying it outward, not letting it vanish. Lar, I gasped, a sound torn from lungs she thought were empty. A pulse shivered in her chest, weak but real, her own beat, not erased. Different now, stretched thin and fragile, but still hers. The void around her dimmed, the chaos settling. The storm was gone. The intruder's presence was gone, and Alara remained. Barely she curled onto herself, trembling, clutching at the faint pulse inside. "Still here," she whispered. "Still me." The silence did not answer, but the beat in her chest went on. The silence stretched, heavy and endless, but Alara no longer drifted in it alone. The faint beat inside her chest steadied, thread by fragile thread, anchoring her in a rhythm she thought she had lost. She tested the space around her. The hollow was quieter now, emptied of the intruder's distortion, its will withdrawn. No pull, no storm, no judgment, only depth, for the first time. She felt it release her. Her breath shook as she reached outward, searching for the faintest trace of home. At first, there was nothing. Then thin, wavering, but unmistakable, her tether to earth stirred. It wasn't strong. It was frayed, scattered, almost broken. But it was there. Tears burned her eyes. She clutched at it, pouring what remained of her rhythm into the thread. "I'm still here," she whispered hoarsely, her voice a plea. "Pull me back." The tether quivered in reply, a faint recognition, Earth's beat answering hers. Not steady, not clear, but real. Relief crashed through her so hard it hurt. She let her body go limp, letting the rhythm carry her upward, away from the hollow. Back toward the lattice she thought she'd never see again. As she rose, the silence stretched behind her, deep and patient, and she knew, though it had released her, the hollow had not forgotten. The pull of her tether grew stronger, tugging her upward, out of the weightless silence. The darkness of the hollow thinned until faint threads of light began to shimmer above her, weaving into shapes she recognized. With a final surge, Alara was flung through. Her eyes snapped open to the broken chamber where she had first crossed over. The air was heavy with smoke and dust, the floor scorched by the collapse of the breach. She collapsed onto the stone, coughing violently, her chest tearing with every breath. But she was breathing. Her hands clawed at the floor until she realized the bead was gone. Nothing but ash clinging to her palm. Her tether flickered inside her, weak but alive, straining with every beat to hold her body together. The world around her was quiet, too quiet. The storm was gone, the intruder erased. Only faint cracks in the air shimmered, already fading. She rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling above, its surface fractured by the battle. Her body trembled, her mind raw. She had resisted. She had survived, but what she had given up, she didn't yet know. The silence pressed against her ears until finally, faint footsteps reached her. Lara, a voice, distant, fragile, but achingly familiar. Her eyes burned as she turned toward it. Kareem stood at the edge of the ruined chamber, pale and unsteady, his face cut and bloodied, but alive. Relief struck her so hard she could only sob. Kareem stumbled forward, his boots crunching over shattered stone, his eyes wide as if he could not believe she was real. When he reached her, he dropped to his knees, hands hovering as though afraid to touch her, afraid she might vanish. "Ilara, you." His voice broke, trembling with exhaustion and grief. "You weren't supposed to come back." She tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat as another sob. "Neither were you." For a moment, neither spoke. They simply held on, clutching each other like two people pulled from a storm that had swallowed everything else. But Kareem pulled back, his gaze sharp with fear. "What did it do to you?" Alara stiffened. She could feel it, the difference inside her. Her rhythm wasn't the same. It no longer beat in the steady, imperfect syncopation she had carried all her life. It had scattered, broken, then reformed. What pulsed in her chest now was hers, but also more than hers. Her fingers dug into the cracked floor. "I don't know," she admitted. The words hurt. "I thought I lost myself. But I'm still here. Just changed." Kareem's eyes searched hers, as if he feared the hollow had followed her back, as if he feared she wasn't Alara at all. She forced her voice steady. "It tried to claim me. I refused. I held on." His jaw tightened. "And the intruder." She swallowed, remembering the scream as the tear consumed it. Gone for now. Silence pressed between them, heavy as stone. Survival had come at a cost. Neither could yet measure. And somewhere deep in the lattice, the echo of the hollow still lingered. They pushed themselves up, leaning on each other for strength, and staggered out of the ruined chamber. The passage beyond was unrecognizable, stone walls cracked and scorched, the air still trembling faintly with the aftershocks of the breach. Where once the stronghold had been filled with voices, only silence remained. A silence, thick with absence. Karen's hand tightened on her arm. His face was pale, jaw clenched as his eyes traced the devastation. "They're gone," he whispered. Ilara's chest ached. She didn't ask who. She knew. The storm had not spared many. They stepped carefully over the wreckage, following the faint light spilling in from the shattered gates. Outside, the world looked bruised, the sky stained with strange hues, as though the storm had brushed its fingers across the horizon and left scars in the clouds. Alara paused, gripping the doorway for balance. Her rhythm faltered inside her, as though uncertain how to align with the world again. Each beat felt slightly out of step, a discord she couldn't smooth. Corinne noticed. His gaze lingered on her, wary. "You're different," he said quietly. Not an accusation, but a truth neither could ignore. Alara looked down at her trembling hands. "I'm not sure how much of me came back." They stood in silence at the threshold of what remained. The stronghold was gone. The storm had ended. And yet, both of them knew, the hollow's shadow had not truly vanished. Somewhere in the rhythm of her chest, Alara felt it still listening. They moved slowly through the wreckage, each step weighted by exhaustion. The silence of the stronghold was unbearable. Not the peace of still air, but the void left by countless rhythms extinguished. Alara pressed her hand against her chest, as if to steady the beat within. It answered, but not in the way it once had. Her rhythm was uneven, layered. Beneath her pulse, she could feel a second one, faint, vast, and impossibly slow. The hollow had left its mark. She froze in the corridor, her breath catching. The faint pulse wasn't hers, but it pulsed with hers, woven through the scar of her tether. It wasn't possession, not yet, but it was there. Corinne noticed her stillness. "What is it?" Ilara's mouth was dry. She wanted to lie, to say it was nothing, but the truth pressed against her ribs like a blade. "I think." It didn't let me go completely. His expression tightened, the fear he had been holding back surfacing in his eyes. "Then we need to end it. Cut it out before it grows." Her heart clenched. She wanted to agree, but part of her knew it wasn't so simple. The hollow's echo wasn't just inside her. It was part of her rhythm now. Severing it might mean severing herself. Alara forced herself to keep walking, though every step trembled. "First we get out, then we figure out what I've become." The words tasted bitter, but she knew they were true. The climb from the stronghold was slow, every stair cracked, every stone echoing with memories of collapse. By the time they reached the last passage, Alara's legs trembled so badly, she had to lean on Corinne to stay upright. The gate above was shattered, its iron twisted as though something immense had clawed through. Daylight streamed in, pale and strange. They stepped out into the open. The air was sharp with the smell of scorched earth. The landscape beyond the fortress walls was unrecognizable. Valleys reshaped, ridges torn open, as if the storm had pressed its hand into the world and left deep scars. Trees were blackened husks. Rivers cut new paths through broken stone. And the sky. The sky was wrong. Pale streaks of light drifted across it like veins, flickering faintly, too steady to be lightning, too alive to be clouds. The storm was gone, yet its residue clung to the horizon. Scars of rhythm burned into the heavens. Corinne stared, jaw tight. "It's worse than I thought." Ilara's breath hitched. Her chest ached with every beat, her rhythm straining against the echo buried inside. She could feel the hollow in the sky's wounds. A presence too far to touch, but close enough to remind her it was not finished. Her hand tightened into a fist. "This isn't just aftermath," she whispered. "It's a warning." Corinne turned to her, his eyes dark with the weight of it. "Then, whatever comes next, we'll face it together." She nodded, though. Inside, she knew together might not be enough. They walked through the ruins in silence. The crunch of ash and stone beneath their boots the only sound. Every step carried the weight of survival, but also of something unfinished. Alara's gaze kept drifting upward. The pale streaks across the sky seemed to pulse, faint but undeniable, like veins carrying a rhythm not of this world. Each flicker made her chest tighten, as if the echo inside her was answering them. She stopped, pressing her hand hard against her ribs. The second pulse within her thrummed in sync with the scars above. Not perfectly, but close enough that she could no longer pretend it was coincidence. Corinne turned back, noticing her stillness. "What is it?" Her voice was low, strained. "It's me, or part of me. Whatever the hollow left inside, it's tied to that." She pointed at the sky, where the streaks shimmered faintly in the clouds. "I can feel it, when they pulse." "I do too." Corinne's face darkened, his jaw tight. "Then it's not over." The storm didn't just pass, it left roots, in the world. In you, Alara's throat closed. She wanted to deny it, to push away the truth, but her rhythm stuttered, betraying her. She felt the hollows echo like a brand beneath her skin, alive and restless. Her whisper was barely audible. "What if I brought it back with me?" The sky answered with another pulse, and her chest echoed it like a drum. The sky pulsed again, faint light rippling across its wounded veins. Ilara staggered, her breath hitching as the echo inside her chest surged in response. It wasn't just reflection anymore, it was resonance, a call and answer. Kareem grabbed her shoulders, steadying her. His eyes searched hers, desperate. "Afraid, Ilara, look at me. Tell me you can fight it." Her lips trembled. She wanted to reassure him, to say yes, but the truth pressed heavy in her ribs. The hollow hadn't only left a scar, it had planted something. A seed, faint but growing. "I don't know," she whispered. Her voice cracked like breaking glass. "It feels alive." Karen's grip tightened. "Then we cut it out before it takes root. We find a way. There has to be a way." Ilara closed her eyes, fighting the rising terror. Cutting it out, could she even survive that? The echo wasn't just lodged in her. It was fused with her rhythm, stitched into her beat. To tear it free might mean tearing herself apart. When she opened her eyes, the sky pulsed again, stronger. Her chest answered, the rhythm beating against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kareem saw it. His face went pale. "It's spreading." Ilara wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. "The storm didn't end, Kareem. It just moved inside me." Silence fell, heavier than stone. The world scarred, the sky bleeding light. And within her, the hollows return already stirring. The sky's veins shimmered, casting pale light across the ruins. Ilara stood beneath them, her chest heaving as the echo inside her throbbed with each pulse. It was no longer faint. It was undeniable. Kareem stood close, his face torn between fear and loyalty. "Tell me what to do," he whispered. "Tell me how to save you." Ilara's eyes stung. She wanted to give him an answer, but there was none. What grew inside her wasn't something he could fight, or kill, or cast out. It was part of her now, a rhythm stitched to her own, impossible to separate. She touched her chest, feeling the uneven beat beneath her palm. "This isn't about saving me," she said softly. "It's about preparing for what's coming." Karen's jaw clenched. "The hollow," she nodded. The storm had not died, it had merely planted itself in her, using her survival as its vessel. The tear had closed, the intruder destroyed, but the hollow had not been defeated. It had found another path forward. Through her, Ilara lifted her gaze to the sky, the scars glowing faintly above. Her voice was steady, though it trembled at the edges. "I thought I ended it, but maybe all I did was carry it into tomorrow." The echo in her chest pulsed harder, answering the sky. She flinched, but did not look away. "I'll hold it as long as I can," she said, her words like an oath. "And when the day comes that it tries to rise again, we'll be ready." Kareem stared at her, grief in his eyes, but also a flicker of resolve. Slowly, he nodded. Together they turned toward the horizon. The scarred world stretched out before them, a world broken, but still breathing. Ilara's rhythm beat unevenly, haunted and flawed, but it was hers. And for now, it was enough. Ilara's journey through the hollow has ended, but her story doesn't close with triumph. It closes with something far heavier, survival carrying a cost. A burden no one else can see, stitched into the very rhythm of her chest. And maybe that's the truth we all share. We don't always come back from the storms of our lives unscarred. Sometimes, they leave echoes inside us, reminders of what we've faced, what we've lost, and what we've become. But those echoes, painful as they are, can also be seeds, not just of fear, but of resilience, of warning, of change. Ilara stood beneath the scarred sky, her heartbeat no longer hers alone, and yet she chose to live with it, to hold it, to prepare for the day it might rise again. That choice is what made her story, not one of defeat, but of defiance. So I'll leave you with this question. What echoes are you carrying, and will you let them break you? Or will you let them become the rhythm that drives you forward? If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Because in every ending, there's the beginning of another story.